Call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the May 6, 2025 Post Falls City Council meeting. Shannon, please note that all council members are present. Under ceremonies and announcements, we do have one announcement. I'd like to take a moment to recognize two outstanding members of our Parks and Recreation Department who were recently honored by the Idaho Recreation and Parks Association. Recreation Supervisor Jason Wiley received the Dr. Leon Green Fellowship Award, the highest award given by IRPA. This award is a tribute to Dr. Green's legacy and is presented to those who have shown exceptional leadership and vigorous activity in the field of parks and recreation. Jason's contributions to both the profession and the community exemplify the spirit of this prestigious recognition. Additionally, Brian Myers, our Parks Manager, received the Professional of Excellence Awards for Parks, Trails, and Conservation. This award recognizes individuals who have made significant and lasting impacts on the parks and trails in our communities and are committed to continuing that high level of service into the future. We're proud of both Jason and Brian for representing Post Falls with such professionalism and dedication. Thank you for all you do. Are there any amendments to the agenda tonight?
We have none tonight, sir.
Are there any declarations of conflict? Seeing none, would you please present the consent calendar?
Item A is minutes from the April 15th, 2025 City Council meeting. Item B is accounts payables April 2nd through May 7th, 2025. And item C is Killdeer Annexation Grants of Right-of-Way and Easements, ANNX-24-4. Item D is Killdeer Meadows Master Development Agreement, SUBD-24-8. Item E is request to dispose of a 2003 Toyota forklift, and the item number is S345. Item F is grant of easement for the Prairie Crossing Sewer. Item G is 711 Pleasant View and Seltice grant of rights of way and easement, SPR-24-27. Item H is North Place East, 3rd Edition Construction Improvement Agreement.
Any questions on the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Motion seconds. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Stickleader.
Aye.
Clue.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Tonight we do have one public hearing, and it's on public hearing on, it is the public hearing on fee increases and new fees. And if anybody wishes to testify, there are forms in the back you can fill out, turn them in, and provide them to Shannon. With that, I'll open the public hearing.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. It seems like it's been a while since I've been up here, but I am doing the pre-summer fee resolution. Of course, we'll bring the fee resolution back during the budget season, but since we have a few fees that need to change prior to the summer kickoff, I thought this is a good time to do that. I have this in a little different format than I have before. Before I used to show it on the current fee resolution and then highlight any changes. This has me go through it a little more thorough than just showing what the changes prior and to before, but I have it still in the same format. One of the suggested proposal for fee changes is a business license from the current $25 to a new license fee of $100 with annual renewal of $50. The police department wants to change the current fee of vehicle storage from $15 to $25 per day.
That's like a vehicle that we forcibly store, right? Not like you're asking the police. Okay.
Yeah.
Impounded.
Yeah. Yeah, they have in their possession, yeah.
Yeah.
The second one they want to change is the current parking fine is $20, and the proposal is to change that to $40. A salvage permit, it allows people to collect junk for 30 days. A current permit is $75, and the proposal is $100. The salvage permit fee for 6 months is currently $300, and our proposal is $500. Some little ones are the PD wants to add increase the cleaning fee for the community room from 25 to 50. Rental of the audio visual from 10 to 15. Copy charges for currently it's $2 and the proposal is $15 regardless of size, and just put it on a thumb drive.
So that would be for any public records that someone requests, it would cost them $15 to get it?
For the copy, it would be on a thumb drive versus printed off on paper, yes.
But if they wanted it in paper, it'd still be $2.
The paper, if it's just on photocopies, it's going to be 10 cents each versus, it depends on the volume they have. If it's just a few papers, then it's $10. But if it's a large if it's voluminous, they'll put it on a thumb drive for a flat fee versus a 10-cent per item charge.
And you could have it emailed to you for free?
I don't know about that.
Most of our public records requests are handled through an online portal.
Gotcha.
Where
Okay.
it's just provided to them for email and download.
Oh, perfect, for nothing.
No.
And generally, if it's a simple request, you get essentially 100 pages free or 2 hours of staff time is included and essentially free.
I know it's not, like, neither of those numbers are very big, but I just want to be really cautious of, like, if someone's requesting public records, which they have a right to have, like, not increasing the fees.
Cumbersome.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Increase of the community room at the police department from 25 to 35. Now's always the time when recreation wants to adjust some of their fees going into the summer season. Adult flag football will be $150 regardless if you're a resident or a non-resident. The adding of rock climbing for an adult is $60 for one session for indoors. The youth rock climbing is $50 for one session indoors. And the rock climbing for a youth for 3 sessions is $130. The change for the volleyball tournament is $110 regardless if you're resident or non-resident, and a proposal to increase that to $150 for both. And also for the youth competitive basketball, $478 for resident, $495 for non-resident, proposed to increase to $485 and $500 respectively.
I'm so sorry, Jason.
It's all right.
I know. Is there a reason that we would have an increased non-resident fee for just the basketball, but not the other things?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I do know they have the increase because it's the since the Parks and Rec is fund. The general fund does fund some of that.
Yeah.
They figure that if you're not a resident, that they should pay a little more. But
Which I agree with.
Yeah.
So the reason for some of the other sports didn't go up is that we did an adjustment at the last one. And then a few more will be adjusted once we hit the fall with the budget cycle. So it's kind of, this is one that we held off as we were looking at the cost of umpires, or the referees in this case, and what it was costing us to get them and the scheduling and stuff. Does that make sense, why we only went with the basketball?
Because that's the only one that will happen in spring and summer?
No, we recognized that we'll start taking registrations long before the budget hearing fees will go into effect, and it had a big impact on us. And we'd already made the adjustment to the other fall programs that we felt comfortable with. So it's based on what it's costing us to operate.
Okay, which seems reasonable, but I don't think that answers my question as
Okay.
to why we would charge more for non-residents just for basketball, but not for football and volleyball. If we're using public, like we're using the Parks Department.
We do
for all
have
of these,
resident, non-resident fees.
but they're not different.
The same.
I would have
You
to go
said-
back and look and see.
But did you say that flag football or the flag football and volleyball, you guys increased those fees last time around, correct?
Correct.
So
Resident, non-resident.
resident, non-resident was
And I know with
last time, this time it just happens to be
Yeah,
basketball.
and the flag football, we actually contract out with the NFL co-op, so those fees were stuck on what it costs us is what it costs us. So, but we can look at the other ones and see. We used to have resident, non-resident, so I will look into that and
Okay,
get back to you.
gotcha, thank you.
Okay?
That would make sense to me, just from a theory. If we're using general fund dollars to fund some of this, then existing taxpayers are already putting something in, and people who are not taxpayers here, it seems like should bear a little extra in the fee
But
structure.
didn't he just Didn't you say that you had, last time around, you did that with those two sports? It just so happens it's basketball this time.
We did, but what's been pointed out to me is that that's not what's reflected now. And we always have historically, so I'll look into it, because we have made sure that our residents do get
Better.
a discount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dave. All right, back on track is the cemetery is proposing an increase for memorial tree from $1,250 to $2,500.
I got to ask on that one.
Okay.
Sorry, Samantha. I want to beat you to it. I want to beat you to it. So is that if you're dedicating or donating a memorial tree in the cemetery? It's now going
That's
to
a Dave
cost you
question as well.
$2,500 instead of $1,250?
The price is going up for a number of reasons. So people will come in and they want to have a tree planted in the cemetery. We choose where it's going to go, but it includes the plaque that memorializes them. And then also we guarantee it for a length of time. So we found our costs have gone up, just the care, the long-term, and then the cost of the plaques that we're using, so.
I've got no problem with the increase. I think you can get the trees, at least most of the trees that the city requires, for about $400. So I'm just curious why it was such a big increase.
Yeah, it's what we found is our actual cost to maintain them, and we're bringing that in. And
Okay.
it's a longer term than just you plant a street tree and you have
Be
3
interesting to
years.
see if it slows down the requests at all.
We don't get a lot of them, but the people that want them are very specific, and a lot of times they want that special tree that was a family favorite, and then we have to find locations, and
Okay.
there's a lot of negotiation that goes in on every one of those.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Parks wanted to add a few items for the, that weren't currently in the fee resolution, such as Grand Pavilion to have heat for $25 per hour, along with the lights for $25 per hour. Black Bay rental of a barbecue for $50. Special room configuration for $75. They wanted to add the ball and sports fields to have a 2-hour minimum from $15 to $20 per hour. The prep of the baseball fields is $40 per day currently, and to increase to $50 per day. Corbin Disc Golf for weekdays is $250, and the proposal is to bring it up to $500. Park donation bench is $5,500. The concessionaire fee is proposing of having $25 per day plus 15% of sales over $500. And for education fitness activities, it'd be $2 per person for any shelter, and then includes then on top of that any shelter or field fees on top of that.
Can you explain the 15% of sales over 500 for a concessionaire? They're just like using the little concession building? Like
Yeah,
the-
there's a lot of places that are standard that do that. Like if you rent like if you go to pig out in the park, for example, the Parks Department has a flat fee plus they get a percentage of the sales. So that's a common practice, but maybe Dave has something else to add.
Yeah, the way it's been set up in the past is I have to negotiate every contract, so we're finding more and more people that do food trucks, specifically the shaved ice cream. They want to drop in, they want to do this. And to go out and to bid for one, it's been cumbersome. A year and a half ago, we worked with Kona Ice. We actually did a percentage, and I can tell you we've made, on a monthly basis, way more from them on just their sales than what we were getting. So that's why we figured $25 is the minimum, and then they'll report back to us, pay 15% over that 500, so that they're at least making some money in it. I have probably 8 ice cream and shaved ice vendors that want to go to our parks.
Yeah, when I read that, I was thinking of like the little league teams that like sell concessions,
Yeah.
like as part of their fundraisers and stuff.
We have
I
a
just-
separate agreement with them. They would not be part of this.
I just didn't want to
This-
charge them 15% over 500.
Yeah, we're seeing more
Okay.
and more people using the public land for commercial use.
Gotcha. No, that totally makes
So-
sense. Yeah, what you're saying makes sense.
Yeah.
I had a misunderstanding of the word, so I'm sorry.
Okay.
Maybe by the-
Currently, we have, the last two I have are, one's the fee in lieu of parking. If somebody's building a development, they don't have enough parking stalls, they can buy into it. Currently, the fee is $6,102. The proposed fee is that I'm asking for is to increase it to $17,815.
That's the one I have a question on.
Okay, go ahead.
Is that regardless of how many parking spots are needed? I know some cities will do, for 1 to 7. I think it's Coeur d'Alene's number. You can pay the fee in lieu of parking, and then there's that when you get over a certain amount of spaces required. Do we have anything like that in place?
That's what it sounds like, is if you have, if you provide enough parking, then you don't have to pay, but if you need additional stalls, and Bob seems like he wants to answer this, but.
Yeah, they have very specific numbers, like, hey, if anything over 8 cars is like 40% you can buy in, and 60%.
Right, so we allow for the fee in lieu of essentially in the downtown area. In the SC5 and 4, I believe, are the only zones that we currently allowed, or the smart code zones. And they're only allowed to buy up to a total of 15 in total. But that's also based on a running scale. If you're required to have, I believe it's over 25 to 40 parking spaces or something like that, you're allowed to buy up to 15. But if you're required to have 100, you're still only allowed to buy up to 15. We just have certain instances where they are a couple shy, and when we're only collecting $60, $100 per stall, it's not enough to cover the cost of construction of it anymore. It was when we put it together the first time, but that had not been adjusted in about 5 years.
And this money goes directly into the improvements that are required to accommodate that parking?
It goes into a pot that would be used to hopefully construct parking.
Okay.
So we are actually using some of those funds to do some construction on the Warren Field parking around the perimeter of it.
Okay.
Some of it had come from that to help to construct a few more parking stalls than we originally would have been able to. So.
I know it's probably necessary, but I prefer to not see fee in lieu of parking, because one of the biggest issues you have is people build, they don't have enough parking, now you got everybody upset.
Right.
But I understand you probably need to do it.
Thank you.
And last but not least is a dye test, increase from 50 to 95.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't have
I don't
no
know.
comment.
Okay.
What is it?
Dye test, I know they use dye test to see if you're connected to the sewer or not. If you're on septic, they will run a test if it goes through.
I'm just curious what we were dying, so.
That's all I have.
Questions, Jason?
I have a question about the first slide in business license, the increase in that fee.
Okay.
As well as the mayor touched on a bit about the memorial tree. So on the first question, the business fee, are we correlating that to direct costs that we are incurring to process business fees, or what is the reasoning behind such a significant?
Let's see, Bob he was the one that proposed the increase. I'll let him speak on that.
We are relating it to the cost that it does take to process a business fee, business license. And we also really wanted to create the two different versions, the new one versus the renewals, because we're getting a lot of people that just won't renew, and staff has to chase them down for multiple times over the course of a year or more. And when they finally come back and renew a couple of years later, they're not paying any additional fees, so they really are just up 25 or $50.
So that would be considered a new permit at that point?
It's considered a new permit if they don't renew. Okay. I did speak with the Chamber of Commerce as well about, hey, we're looking to increase from 25 going up to, say, $50 or $100. And the response I got from over there was people won't bat an eye. $25 is people forget about it. Yeah. They don't really think about it. So that's one of the reasons why we were hoping that having the 2 tiers would help with that as well.
That makes sense. So do you know when the last time the business license fees were updated?
Probably when we instituted our business license.
Yeah. So that's probably some of the major increases, is that we're kind of catching up to.
Yeah, it takes enough time to put them together, to do the renewals, to process them, to do review, especially for the first round, because we need to do reviews as to is this going to be a permitted use? Is this going to cause a change of use and require the building to be upgraded? There's a lot of things that go into it. So
That is the original fee from when we originally instituted the business license fee, so it's probably 15 to 20 years old.
Oh, then,
Yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense.
That makes sense. And probably similar answer then on the memorial tree. When was the original cost of that instituted? Has it been 10 years to where we see?
Longer than 10 years ago. And what staff did when they looked at it is they looked at our cost for a 10-year period, because this is something we do forever. But we figure that 10-year really gets it established, so. And is it dollar for dollar on every tree? No. Different types of trees, some need additional care. It's just,
Yeah, no, totally understandable. That was probably the biggest explanation is we are playing catch up a little bit on some of these.
Any questions? Jen, anyone wishing to testify?
We have none.
Close the public hearing. Council, how would you like to act, or discuss, or?
This all sounds reasonable to me. Some of these fees that were $10 or $20, like maybe that paid for something 20 years ago. It doesn't pay for anything now, so I think it is important we cover our costs with this stuff.
And if $100 for a business isn't prohibitive, I don't know, but then it seems reasonable. If it was too high, like when we talked about alcohol licensing fees, then I think that we should discuss it more. But if you're confident and the chamber says that it's not too much, then that seems reasonable.
Well, then I see on the 100 is the new business, so if someone, as he said, if someone doesn't renew and waits a couple of years and wants to come in,
Yeah.
so it makes sense for them to renew. So
Creates a sense of urgency a little more.
I'd move to, so what's the motion supposed to be, Field?
You're gonna bring back an ordinance?
So it'll come back as you would move to approve and direct staff to bring back a resolution to formally adopt the fees.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second for the discussion. Very sneaky. Roll call, please.
Blue,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Stigleader,
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next on the agenda tonight is unfinished business, returning ordinances and resolution. The first item, first of many, is construction agreement for Warrenfield Park Road frontage improvements.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Robbie Quinn, Parks Planner, here this evening seeking council's approval for the mayor to sign an agreement with W.M. Winkler for the Warren Park Road frontage improvements. So a little bit of background. About a year ago, we applied for a Idaho Community Development Block Grant for these road frontage improvements at Warren Park, which we were then awarded in August of 2024 for $325,000. So what was going to be included in that, or is going to be included in that project, is road frontage improvements along 2nd and Idaho at Warren Park, which include curbing, stormwater management, sidewalks, asphalt parking, pedestrian lights, ADA ramps, and access into the park, and associated landscape and irrigation improvements. And so this went out to bid on March 19th, and we had the bid opening on April 2nd. We received 4 bids, with the low responsive bidder at about $302,000, which was W.M. Winkler. And then after our consultant and legal review, they were in fact deemed the low responsive bidder. And just to note, the engineer's estimate was $327,000, so a couple came in below that number. And then I do want to bring up in the JUB review, you may have noticed that W.M. Winkler was called out at $62 million for their bid. And that was just calculation error on how they filled out the bid form. They put the unit cost in, or the final cost in as the unit cost, which ballooned their number, but their actual total was 390, so which they were still the highest bidder. We are also seeking 10% contingency for any potential unforeseen circumstances out there for about $30,000, bringing the total ask this evening to $332,534.40, which again would be paid for out of the grant funding, and then if needed, portion of that contingency out of our general fund budget that we have for the other Warren Park improvements that we're completing simultaneously with this project.
Any questions, Robbie?
Any questions?
So how much, the grant was $350,000?
$325,000.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yep.
turkeys. We're just a little bit high on.
So is this the back-end angled parking?
Yes.
How well has that been working over there?
Well, that's probably something for PD or
I
someone else
would
to
hasten to guess
answer
you're
than
not gonna
me,
get
but-
50% of the cars parked over there, parking the right way.
It is always a process in every city you go to, and eventually people do figure it out. Yes, the one across the street was a pilot project. The signage could be better. We get better responses to it when the signage is improved. We've looked at adding the additional signage to it. But it does take time. And the rest of the city, rest of the developments that have been happening are constructing it in accordance with the city center parking plan, so there are back and angled parking spaces elsewhere going throughout. For instance, at the Spokane Eats, that will be opening up down on 2nd Avenue. They've got back end parking there. And I expect that it will be utilized as back and angled, hopefully. But it does take time to process it, and maybe eventually we'll do enforcement on it. That's to be seen, though.
Did you see me looking over there?
It
It wouldn't be you, I know, but-
We have discussed the fact that enforcement would be a piece of that. It's just not currently being done.
Because I love the concept and that, you know, it's safer if everybody does it, but what I see happening across the street is half the people are facing the wrong way, and then when they try to back out of their spot, they're going the wrong.
And if you do visit other cities that have implemented it, it does take time, but you can go and see 100% implementation. Or
Okay, so it
100% follow.
actually is
So it does
doable.
work.
There's hope.
And it is, ultimately, it is safer.
Right.
And that's kind of the goal, so.
And it's safer because when you back out, because you're not backing out into
You're pulling out and you can easily see what's
Well,
going on.
and when you
it's
back in-
often, and especially safer for like bicyclists and stuff like that are on the roadways.
The other thing too, when they're backing in, especially on a site like this, you know, the kid's getting out of the car, the door opens, and then they're going
Protects kids.
back towards the,
Back towards
you know, the sidewalk instead of out towards the road.
That's what sold me on it when they first presented it, is you back in, they open the doors, the kids aren't running towards the street, they're going towards the field.
Gotcha. Okay. Sounds great.
Thanks to backup cameras, it's getting easier.
Yes. I would ask, following up on Joe's comment on enforcement, especially on this part, I hope we can enforce parking on 2nd, because there's lots of folks that have decided that park is their spot to park their boats during the week when they're not using them, extra cars, et cetera. So hopefully we can clean that up. Need a motion?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
And I feel like I've asked this before, so forgive me if I have. 3rd Street, or actually
First.
First Street, kind of similar issues that we've had of long-term kind of local residents parking there a long time. So I have a question about that for enforcement, but also why we're not incorporating improvements for parking along that.
That was just a funding
Oh, just
issue.
budget.
Yeah,
budget
we just didn't
constraint.
have the budget at this time. We did get it surveyed, so, you know, that'll hopefully be easier when we do have funding to reduce some of the future costs.
I see, okay.
Good. Entertain a motion.
I would move to approve the construction agreement for Warren Field Park Road frontage improvement.
Second.
Motion seconds, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Malloy,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Stigleader,
Aye.
Blue,
Aye.
Motion passes, thank you. Next up is the ordinance Killdeer annexation.
I move to place the ordinance Killdeer Annexation ANNX-24-4 on its first and only reading by title only while under suspension of the rules.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion? Roll call?
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Stigleader,
Aye.
Blue,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Motion passes. Mr. Harrington.
An ordinance of the City of Post Falls, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho annexing property consisting of approximately 4.89 acres located at 2640 East Killdeer Avenue, providing for amendment of the official zoning map and providing for an effective date hereof.
I move to approve the ordinance Killdeer Annexation ANNX-24-4 and to direct the clerk to assign the appropriate number and that it be published by summary only.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Stigleader,
Aye.
Flu,
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item, item C, is Public Works Operations Center.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. John Beecham, Public Works Director, here to seek some guidance from you on something we've talked about a few times, which is a future Public Works Operations Center. Especially looking for your feedback on this presentation. Feel free to stop me as I'm going through and ask questions. I'm happy to answer questions at the end as well. To outline what we'll talk through, I'm going to give a little background on what the site is, talk about a feasibility study we did, look at a little bit of the financial elements of it, talk about recommendations, and then into the next steps and discussion. So where is this future Public Works Operations Center? You can see on the map where we are at City Hall. The future Operations Center is to be sited at a property we've purchased in working together with Parks between Corbin Road and Pleasant View on right-of-way for Hargrave Avenue. Hargrave Avenue is not developed there yet, but that's what the cross street would be. In terms of where we are in this project, we started the master planning effort for a lot of city facilities back in 2021. This was included in the budget for this year, or last year, to do a feasibility study, carried over into this year, and that's where we are right now. If we move forward, we would then go into the actual design effort and construction to follow. To go through a little bit of the background, this was one of the recommendations in the 2021 Facilities Master Plan, is to build a Public Works Operations Center. What that does is it allows us to move a lot of facilities that are co-located on our water reclamation facility somewhere else so that we have more room to expand that facility down the road. 2 properties were purchased out of the recommendations of this plan. The one we're talking about on Hargrave Avenue, and also property next to the police department for expansion there. Those were the first actions taken out of that facilities plan. That plan itself was sort of a master plan, if you will. We have those for a lot of our utilities and streets. This is for all the non-program things, the support facilities, if you will. So it doesn't include a park, but it includes the Parks Operations Center. It doesn't include the water reclamation facility, but it includes parking that might be helpful for that facility to operate. In terms of the public works specific elements, there was sort of a 3-step plan. There was some interim improvements to be made at the existing streets and fleet facility and the water division. There was property to be purchased, and then there was this future operations center down the road. For context, this is our existing streets facility. It's a repurposed Mazda dealership from the, I actually don't know when it was built, but many years ago, 70s or 80s. It works okay. The location is really the biggest problem, which is at the in the middle of where a future expansion of the water reclamation facility will be. In terms of our progress on this plan, we, in conjunction with City Council, determined the interim work was cost prohibitive. We were looking at about $1 million to upgrade that facility with the intention of knocking it down in 15 or 20 years. That did not make sense. We did get the property purchased. That was done in 2022. And we're here tonight to talk about relocating those facilities. This feasibility analysis in the packet, but I brought it if you have any questions, was authorized by council sort of in lieu of those interim improvements. Basically, the idea was, instead of spending the money on something that we know we won't be able to use for a long time, let's see if we can build something now that would be useful for a lot longer. The findings, spoiler alert, the construction of it is feasible, and the cost estimate is around $11.6 million. This is a concept. If you have comments and suggestions about where the blue car should park, this is just a concept to see if it fits. So we've reiterated that with a few staff who reviewed it as well. And it's not a final design. But what you see there is an admin facility where we would have the supervisors, crew leads, as well as management, and a place for me to meet with staff. And that's the yellow building in the front. There is a large shop in the back that houses streets on one side, water operations on the other. Then there's a lot of covered parking that keeps the millions of dollars of fleet assets we have from deteriorating in the sun and rain. Staff parking in the front and visitor parking as well.
Those are covered, not enclosed?
Covered, not enclosed. There are a few, if you look kind of at the top right of the image, there's a few enclosed spots. Those are for vehicles that need to be protected from freezing in the wintertime. What the feasibility analysis looked at was what it would take to develop this site, and we sort of acknowledge it's on a not improved road right now. There's no water and sewer there. We'd have to get the utilities there. So the analysis was to try to get a better picture of what it would cost to get all of that infrastructure built. Things that are included, and I talked about this a little bit, but the administration, streets operation, water operations, so bringing those together in one location would be a good thing. Crew space accommodations, this is things like locker rooms, break rooms, a mud room to be coming in and out of the facility. The water shop is a large part of that shop area. And then obviously the gates and the site improvements, security and site improvements is what that is. So important, talk about what's there. It's also important to talk about what would not be there at this time that we would likely need in the future. The biggest one is relocating our fleet division. That would not quite double that shop space that you saw in the rendering. So it adds significantly more fleet facilities. At this time, that's cost prohibitive to do. It would be great if we could do that. Relocating the sign shop is a much lesser expense, but that is something that's also not in this estimate at this time. And what we did is we sort of backed our way into what things can we afford to do right now for the budget that we anticipate having out of that facilities plan. Roads in both directions. So we're anticipating building a nice road, one to either Corbin or to Pleasant View, but not both at this time. Not all of the covered storage we would like to have is included in this. Expansion space for future operations, little bit is included, but we're not building this. That cost estimate doesn't get us to, say, 2060 or anything like that. This is a few isolated extra spaces. There's no dedicated training room, but the more we thought about that, that was something where we can combine a locker, not a locker room, but a break room and a smaller meeting room and use that space for the times when we do need trainings. And then a decant facility and a wash facility are really something that you need a sewer service for, which I'll talk about in a second. The general fund would contribute about $5.7 million of this estimated 11.7. Water would make up the bulk of the remainder, and then the water reclamation contribution is for the admin staff who would be located at this facility. And what that lets us do is keep most, if not, keep all of the public works management under one roof, so there's better collaboration between groups, and only the work groups who need to be located somewhere else would be offsite. So like the water reclamation facility folks have to be at the water reclamation facility. They can't work here. The custodial crews need to be at City Hall where their work is, so that sort of thing.
So that's about half enterprise fund?
Just under half, but yes.
Yeah, okay.
Met with you all a few months ago, back in February, and we talked about the financial plan for the master plan at large. Generally, this feasibility analysis fits within that. This is the cash flow that we talked about at that time. It does include the reserves transfer that we talked about $4 million from the vehicle reserves to the facilities reserve. Other than that, this is just anticipating a slight increase in facilities funding as time goes on. The gray in here is police impact fees, which largely fund facilities project as well. And you'll be hearing more about this, but there's upgrades at police and parks that are also forecast in the next few years. I guess an important thing in here is we are proposing to spend that facilities reserve account down, and that may sound like a bad thing, but that's actually what it is intended to be used for. So we've put the money aside to build capital projects. That money is becoming less valuable every year with inflation. one of the best investments we can do is build long-lasting infrastructure components with that. With that, the staff recommendation is to procure a design contract to get architectural drawings put together for building this. It does satisfy a long-term need. It gets the it opens space up at the water reclamation facility, but it also modernizes our public works facilities in a way that's very needed. And then it's financially aligned with that facilities master plan, which is a good thing. That means it is viable to move forward. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions to John?
Yep. Once the project is green lit, what's the time frame for building it out? How long until you're out of the interim place?
So, having not built one of these in the ever, I would guess it's probably a 1.5-year construction project, and probably we would, if we were greenlit today, maybe we would start next spring with construction, just by the time we got the plans put into place. So, that's assuming we'd come back to you with bids, and the bids were acceptable and that sort of thing as well.
And then the things you had on the right-hand side, the future needs to fully build out the project, that was kind of a big list.
Yes.
And do we have any, we probably haven't done any budgeting on what that's gonna cost. And how urgent is it to build that out? How quickly are you, you're gonna finish this up and then be right back in the pot for more, right?
That's more or less correct. I came back to this financial analysis slide because what was in that facilities master plan was not to build this facility initially. It was do those interim improvements, and then in about 2039, go out for a bond to build this facility, and then build it all at once. Mm-hmm. What we're essentially proposing with this is, instead of some of those other things, we'll build part of it earlier, and then as funding builds back up after this initial cash outlay, as funding becomes available, we will make those expansions for fleet and sign shop and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So the hope is, as we get out toward in the 2030s, we'd have funding available to do that. Obviously, if we got more funding available sooner, we'd probably try to do that sooner. If the costs of this or other projects are larger than we think they'll be, things would get pushed back. Does that answer your question?
It does.
I wish I could tell you an exact year, but
Yeah.
So we have land available to do all the future expansions there?
yes. So we looked at a great slide of that in here. But what we had the architect look at is building this out and saying, okay, we'll need more things here. Is there room to expand the fleet shop north? Is there room to expand parking around the perimeter? And yes, so this is a slightly larger site than recommended in the facilities plan, and there will be a point where it gets tight, but we're looking 20, 30, 40 years before that's an issue.
Okay, so the plan right now is to build it on septic and then at some point in the future, switch it over to sewer?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. I did include that in the staff report, but I didn't have a lot on it in my presentation. Yes, the plan is to build it on septic today. We think we have room for about the employees we have today plus about 50% more employees on a septic system. We're helped in that a lot of the employees come and then go somewhere else for most of their day and then come back. So
Right.
that helps. That is probably the most tricky thing about building this facility. So, and there's not sewer nearby currently. Otherwise, we'd be looking at doing that.
And for those wish list improvements, those are going to require sewer, doing the decant and the
Yes,
wash
so
facility, right?
so if we were to have some sort of vehicle wash system, that obviously needs sewer. We're not going to send that to our septic system or build something on site to put it in a swale or something like that. That's not our intention.
So is there a timeline by which we need to get sewer out there? Because we have to be thinking about this when we're looking at other annexations or the urban renewal district over there. Like, how are we going to get it out there in the next X number of years, right?
So we would have capacity on the septic, like I said, for about 50% more employees, and that is over and above considering having moved the fleet department there already. So there's no immediate need from a staffing perspective for that to happen. And then in terms of things like the decant facility or a wash system, Those are facilities we could continue to site at the water reclamation facility, and that's what we will do in the interim. So it would be operationally helpful to move them, but if we can't do that, we're not quite up against a wall. We still have that facility, and it's not such a large footprint that it impacts the operations of the water reclamation facility.
Okay, so I know we've recently denied some annexations that would have pushed city limits in that direction, and I want to make sure we're kind of on two different pages with committing to this and then not having we better annex out or something like that, right?
I understand what you're saying.
Any questions?
You know that this gives me heartburn. We've discussed this before. It's a big project. I feel like it's quite far out of the town that currently exists, and that building on this piece of property sort of sends this message that we are interested in pushing the city limits out there, I think is kind of, to Randy's point. But I trust you, and I know that you do a good job, and you think a lot of things through. So I did want to ask, I saw the 50% staff increase in your, in the report. Are we trying to increase the staff out there by 50%? So that's not hiring 50% more staff.
That's not a goal of hiring 50% more staff. That is making sure that if operational needs required us to do that, we have not boxed ourselves in to where they have to go to some locker room offsite to use the restroom because we don't have septic facilities for them.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the water and water reclamation, using so much from the water budget, which is, we charge for that, right? So it's different than the general fund. Is that appropriate based on who we're sending out there if we're expanding the water reclamation facility?
I think I understand your question, and what we are doing is, if you took the water shop relocation in isolation, currently water is using a building on property purchased by the Water Reclamation Division, and they contributed to 50% of the cost to build that building. But they don't have their own site. They don't have, other than half of that building, the shop building and some of the admin facilities, there is no water division location. So they are essentially building a headquarters for the water division as part of this project, with a full shop for the foreseeable future for what their needs are, with the parking they need, and also the admin facilities for the utilities folks that help oversee that group. So it is very appropriate for the water funds to be used for that.
In such a large way, 5 million.
If we were to only do that as part of this project, it would probably be more because there would be no cost share on all the site improvements from the general fund.
Okay.
So it's not in this presentation or the staff report. I can provide it if you'd like, but I went through each attribute that the architects costed out for us. So like the break room. I said, well, the break room is going to be used equally by all the employees who are located there. Divide the cost up that way.
Okay.
And then water shop. Water shop's used 100% by the water division.
Okay.
And I went through each of those elements, and that's how I came up with that split. The 5.7, I don't remember the exact number, sorry, but
0.8. Yeah. Okay, perfect. That was sort of what I was curious about since it was such a large number.
Could I speak to your question about the location, since I have the map up?
Yes, yes.
This is something we've talked a lot about internally, my staff and with others in the city. It is a ways out there, especially now. I don't know that it is required for growth to occur in that area for it to make sense for us.
Okay.
We need a location that has enough room for us to do our operations, that has compatible zoning, so we don't really want to be in a residential zone. The almost 10 acres we have there is a good size space for us. There's a shortage of available 10-acre sites with zoning we want that we can afford. And it is located very close to Pleasant View Road, close to Corbin Road, close to Prairie Avenue. And from Pleasant View, you can get down to either the freeway or to Seltice. So there are worse places in terms of access to the whole city for us to site this. It's not centrally located. We would love it if there was something right in the middle of the city that fit all those parameters. we weren't able to find that, so this was sort of a, well, this is viable, this works, the transportation corridors are acceptable for us, and the property's affordable, which is very helpful, so, and available, that's the other part of it.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you allowing me to push a little bit and ask the questions. And then just from your presentation, the only other thought that I had is it sounds like you're going to be removing managers from working in the buildings with the employees that they manage. Did I misunderstand that?
I think it's almost the opposite. So we would be bringing the streets crews, the water crews, hopefully the fleet crews down the road, and the streets and fleet and water crews,
Okay.
Potentially some of the water reclamation crews, and having them all housed at this facility. Water reclamation will keep offices and a presence at the facility, the water reclamation facility. Just that's where they need to be to operate it.
Yeah.
But the goal is to get as much of Public Works under one roof as possible. The three managers, our utilities manager, Public Works maintenance manager, and our projects manager would all have offices at this location.
Okay.
So, and then I would have an actual office there, so when I go visit, I could meet one-on-one with employees and that sort of thing without dragging them to some big conference room or something.
Gotcha. Okay. Can I ask one more question? So, any staff not classified as management, I call them worker bees where I'm at, but I don't want to be rude. How do they feel about this?
How do I say this? They would like an upgrade of their facilities.
Okay.
That's the feedback I hear the most is
So they're okay with the location and the splitting. I want to be cognizant of their opinions about it as
I
well.
haven't specifically done like a poll to see where they would like to be located. The general consensus is we'd like better facilities and more modern facilities.
Okay.
And I haven't heard a lot of feedback other than it's a long way from there to Riverside Harbor, which is true. So I have heard that feedback. And like I said, that's something we've discussed a lot. But that's been the biggest sort of negative is just it's on one side of the city.
Okay. If they do have like reasonable concerns, can you make sure that we are aware of them so that we can consider them?
Yeah, I absolutely will. So,
Thank you.
I guess if we get into design and this isn't going to work, we'll let you know that.
So John, you need a motion tonight was it to go out for design?
Yeah, I think I'm looking for sort of a go, no-go.
Okay.
If you're okay with me going out to design, we would do a solicitation for that and then bring back a design contract. So I'm not trying to authorize anything
Sure.
tonight. Just
Do we need a formal motion or just head nod?
I would take a formal motion just as an action item.
I move to go.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Westland,
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Blue,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Motion, I was waiting for one more. Motion passes, thank you. Thanks, John.
thank you.
Next up is the CPACE financing program. Shelley.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I'm back here tonight. We had presented the CPACE program to the council on March 18th, and there were some questions that came out of that meeting. And Field and myself have gone out and done the research to try to answer those questions for you. So we're back tonight, just looking for direction on proceeding. There's nothing to be actually adopted at tonight's meeting. We'll go through the questions, take any additional questions you might have on the program, and then see the next steps for review. So the questions that we received on the 18th were setting a boundary different than the city boundary, excluding residential projects from the program, excluding specific business types from the program, who would verify and inspect the improvements that qualify for the financing, and the time commitment that would be made by the finance staff. So the first question is, may the city establish a boundary different than the city boundary? And the answer to that is yes. You may see some districting or regioning occur with other programs. We can't do anything that extends outside the city boundaries would be the only qualifier on that. So if the council desired to have a boundary that was smaller than the city, so if we just wanted it for the downtown district, for example, we could do that. excluding residential projects from the program, and the answer, and Field's here on this one because he is the one that did the research, if you have additional questions, but the basic answer is no, the city would not have the authority to disqualify specific subcategories of otherwise eligible property. So the act explicitly includes specific multifamily residential properties in the definition of commercial property that qualify for the program. Those are 5 or more units. So, any questions on that? May the city exclude specific business types from the program? And the quick answer to that one again is no. The act does not contain any provisions that differentiate eligible properties based on the nature of the business conducted in the premises. One of the things I can say in talking to the folks who've done some of this financing, the cost to do this type of financing are more than regular financing. So you're not going to see it for the mom and pop type of shops or the smaller. You see it used for larger, and I think Councilor Stigliter had referenced that you were looking at larger cities were the ones where you were seeing this type of financing be used. And that is because there are additional costs with using this type of financing. You're not going to see it on really small projects or, again, those mom and pop type of businesses. So it'll be your larger projects that you'll see that are looking for that longer term financing. And so Coeur d'Alene, in fact, in talking with them, the project that they had is likely not going to use the CPACE program, and that's because they've discovered that their costs are going to be less than they originally projected. And so they're going to use regular commercial financing. At this point, that's how it looks. So they have approved, it's ready, it's on the shelf, it can be used, but Coeur d'Alene's project is looking at not using the financing.
So it's like higher loan origination fees, but a lower interest rate. So it only makes sense over a certain
Yes.
amount.
Yes.
Longer term.
Yeah.
And Coeur d'Alene's was really looking for the longer term is what they were looking for at the time.
Okay.
Who verifies and inspects the improvements to guarantee the improvements made qualify for the CPACE financing? So Jason and I got on the phone with Rexburg. They just recently did a financing down there. They used a company called Nuveen. Nuveen is a financing company that finances CPACE projects all over the United States. And they will bear the responsibility for ensuring compliance with the CPACE Act. So they take on that responsibility. Both the lending entity and the borrower will attest to the improvements in the qualification for the act. Generally, that company is going to use a construction manager. That's just generally, they don't have to. Nuveen handles all of that from the financing perspective. And that kind of plays into the second question of the time commitment for the finance staff. So again, the city's role is minimal. The lending entity manages the application project process for the project. The city would receive the $500 for the submission of the program application, and then the city would receive a servicing fee equal to 1% of the total amount financed, not to exceed $50,000. So for Rexburg, they just got a check in the mail for $50,000 right at the beginning. The project was large enough that that's what.
Is that over the life of the loan? So it's
Yes.
one-time 50?
Yes. And again, from Rexburg's perspective, the finance department has had minimal time that they spent on it. If you did end up having to go through the property tax, right now what they have set up is basically the entity is going to pay directly on the loan. And if you had to go, if they weren't paying their property taxes and it was going to collections, the county would end up with the 3-year going out. Warren, I'm looking at you for when they foreclose on property through the county. There's a name for that, but I can't think of what it is right now.
Essentially a tax deed sale.
Yes, a tax deed sale. Then there would be additional costs associated with that, and the property owner would bear that cost. So if the council desires to proceed with the program, there are a couple of steps. You saw these at the last one. It would be, step 1 would be a resolution of intent. We would create a program guidebook. I actually looked at Rexburg's. Theirs is a little easier to understand than Coeur d'Alene, so I would get with legal and determine what program guidebook we would want. But there are models out there, so we can basically copy one and go with that. I just felt Rexburg's, when I was looking through it, seemed a little easier and a little bit easier for the end user and for the city to understand less wordy, is what I'd say. The intent and the steps are the same, there's just less words involved. Step 2 would also be the public hearing. I think Coeur d'Alene held their resolution of intent and they'd already scheduled their public hearing, or they held them on the same night. And then step 3 would be the resolution establishing the program. I can take any
Questions of
questions
Shelley?
you might have.
Recommendation, thoughts?
Yeah, so can you kind of walk me through the process? If somebody wants to pursue this kind of funding, do they come to the city first, or do they go to the lender first?
So I'm gonna say it depends. It depends upon who is doing it and if they're familiar with the program. So in Rexburg, they actually came with the financing company, Nuveen, when they asked for the financing. With Coeur d'Alene, they went to the city first, and the city set up a program. And I don't believe they had a financing company associated with that at this state. But you could do either direction. The finance company is going to come to the city if the property owner goes to them first.
So we take an application, and then what exactly do we do with the application? Give that to the financing company, and then they do all the enforcement?
Yes. Yeah, they process the application and everything. So we will host the application on our website.
Financing decisions will be made by the lender, though.
Yes.
From a city standpoint, there's very little difference of this compared to traditional commercial financing as far as work.
Correct.
So just to clarify that question, the reason that a potential developer would go to the finance company first and then approach the city is if the city doesn't have the program in place. Am I assuming?
Or they just might be associated with the finance. So Nuveen isn't somebody who I know. I just found out about them through Rexburg, but it could be a company that is already associated with Nuveen. Also, we've had in the past with our industrial revenue bonds where they wanted to use Washington Trust Bank. And so when they came to us, they asked to use Washington Trust Bank. I don't know if the local banks have done any kind of C-PACE financing. My guess is not. So.
And they may not come to the city until they know they have the financing available.
Yeah, right. So the kind of the incentive for the city to participate in this program is to attract potential development of large projects like this.
Yes, it's just one more tool in our toolbox. I'm not really anticipating this will be used a great deal. I could be completely wrong, but looking at other cities about our size and kind of, I was searching around, you see a handful of projects that have used it. And again, they have to be, what I'm hearing is the project needs to be at least 5 million before it makes sense to use this type of financing.
And it's not something that we have to put it in place and have it ready to go. We couldn't put it in place when a need arose, right?
You could wait and put it in place when the need arose. It takes time because you're going to have a public hearing.
Yeah,
But that's what
yeah,
Coeur d'Alene
that's what I was
did.
thinking. Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be a few months, right?
Yes, it'd be, I'd say approximately 2 months field. Would that sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, given department pressure, depending on what we're working on, but yes, generally it would just go through that resolution of intent, public hearing, and resolution establishing the program. It's really just a matter of time to put together the guidebook.
And from our perspective, the Coeur d'Alene had initially introduced this. We looked at it and said, okay, we'll look at that later because we've got a whole bunch of things going on. And then we had a couple of the developers through Jobs Plus ask us about it. And we said, okay, we'll take it forward to the council for consideration.
So we've had some interest.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's
There's a
that's what I wanted
potential
to know.
project on Prairie that could consider it.
That's good enough for me.
Okay.
And this should be revenue positive for the city,
Yes.
given staff time and things. So it feels a little awkward to me that cities have anything to do with somebody's financing arrangement, but it's a state program they created, right? And so we kind of operate under that framework. And if we have an opportunity to sort of take the tax burden off citizens by doing some creative financing thing that the state set up, it seems like we should probably do it.
Yeah, for the city, it's just a fee. I mean, there's no
Right.
risk.
Minimal risk.
Yeah.
Zero
We're not
risk.
lending any money, it's just fee generator.
So it's 1% annually or 1% over the life of the loan?
It's 1% for the entire loan, so they pay that 50,000 or the 1% at the time of the loan origination.
And the loans are for
Up to 30 years, yes.
But at that point, the city's going to have little involvement, correct?
Correct.
Well, somebody is still doing something because it's still being put on their taxes and collected and sent out to the bank, right?
The county will have it on the taxes, and they will do the collection of it. If that's, so what most of them are doing, they actually are paying the bank directly. They're not going through that process. They're just allowed to go through that process of having it on the property taxes.
And what is the point?
What's the point? The length-
30-year loan.
30-year loan, the length of the mortgage. or
And the
financing.
ability to put it on your taxes.
But they're not.
So in other words, if I
an option.
take this loan and I don't make a payment, they have the ability to put it on the taxes and it becomes a lien on your property tax.
Gotcha.
Enforcement.
Okay. I struggle more, I guess, than you do, Counselor Westland, with having the government involved in this like very commercial on commercial interaction or private on private interaction. My other concern is about how multifamily is considered residential when we want to build more places for more people to live, but then it's considered commercial when we want to make it easier for people to finance things. And so that really wasn't the answer that I was hoping for on that question. And that is really enough for me to say that this is too much of a Pandora's box, I feel like. Unless, I don't know, someone has some other opinion that could persuade me that it would be beneficial for us to encourage via this way, perhaps more multifamily buildings.
I think if I'm understanding your point, the designation of our occupancy zoning is based on what is occupying, not the process of financing. So even now in an R3 high density zone for the owner, that is a commercial property.
Right.
The occupancy then is R3, which is a higher density.
Yeah.
So there is no distinguishing factor on the lending side, which we're now looking at, between the two, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, but I think what we're talking about and the point of the CPACE program is to encourage development and to encourage a certain type of development within a city. Like we're talking about bigger companies making either large improvements or, if I understand it correctly, being allowed to build a building that meets certain qualifications. And so I think like the proposition or the position of this is that as a city, we're saying, yes, we would like our city employees and to be part of this. It's a state program that is offered. And by saying yes to this, we are, there's a word that I'm looking for, but we are positioning ourselves in a way to say we promote this type of development. And I think that makes sense, and I really liked the C because I think LA just had a PACE program, and that was, if I understand, a disaster. The C makes it commercial, and I think that's great. I think that's totally reasonable. I don't think that multifamily falls into that, and if there's not a way to exclude it, according to the research that you've done, I would say that it's actually not something that I'm supportive of.
Okay.
Well, we do have the option to set a boundary, so we could draw a line around our commercial areas and say that's the boundary.
Okay, that seems like.
So that's my understanding.
Well, and this isn't the only step that we have to review that development application either. So just because the financing is approved and they come to the city and say, well, this is what we plan to do with this financing is to build a giant multi-story R3 subdivision, we still have the opportunity to say, no, that doesn't fit with what we want to do with our master plan. So it's not a carte blanche, yes, we accept this as a commercial building. But what it does do is open opportunity for more significant investment in commercial properties that do exclude high-density residential housing.
I want to be very clear. I am very much in support of that. It's just, as a youth pastor that I used to have once said, a little poo in the brownie, and that's what makes me nervous here. So
if you've got a project moving forward, putting on my old banker hat, personally, I mean, it's nice if they're going to get, for them, if they're going to get a longer amortization, I don't think having or not having the CPACE program is going to be a deal maker or a deal breaker. I think if they're going to qualify for the financing, they're going to qualify for the financing. If they qualify for the financing and the land is approved for the type of development they want to put in, whatever that may be, they will move forward with it. And I think this is maybe something a cherry, if you will, that they can go pick, but I don't think it's not going to make the deal or it's not going to break the deal.
Yeah, you're not gonna see multiple businesses come in and go, this is a perfect opportunity to build multifamily. It's just not-
Or commercial.
Or commercial.
Yeah, because
I
they're
think
gonna
you're
have
gonna
to
have a very, very small handful of people that use it, and as Mayor said, if they're already qualified, they're already qualified. This is just, maybe it's just a little bit nicer. We already have businesses that have at least communicated or wanted to investigate it. I mean, we could pigeonhole it down so small in a region that it's worthless and we never use it, but I don't agree with that. So I think it's a good fit. I think it's something we should explore.
I would rather just have it be citywide and let people kind of do with it what they wish. I know we have a lot of aging commercial or industrial buildings that need energy efficiency improvements if they're going to be kind of restructured and used for new business, and I think that's exactly what this is intended to do. It's for energy efficiency or water efficiency or any kind of efficiency upgrade, right? This is kind of the point of the program.
I think the first one was HVAC. The one that was mentioned was someone had a huge HVAC system, last year. So you're looking for,
I got,
go ahead, I'm sorry, Joe.
just a comment.
Been quiet tonight, so I forgot.
My throat's kind of sore, so apologies for being quiet, but in every case up until now, the financing decision, how somebody pays for a development doesn't even cross our minds. And the question in front of the council is, what's the zone gonna be? What's permissible in that spot? And we haven't ever cared whether they bring bags of cash to the contractors or, do a conventional commercial loan or whatever. So it's been completely outside of our zone of anything. Excuse me. So, all this is kind of it is kind of strange that it's basically bringing the heavy hand of government as enforcing the collateral against the loan because we can tax, and if they don't pay the tax, then people go to jail and all that sort of fun stuff, right? But really, as a city, in terms of what's going to get built in the first place, is irrespective of how they pay for it. So I don't really see this as it's got to be zoned right anyway in the first place, whether they get a 15-year loan on a 30-year loan or pay cash for it. So we've got every opportunity that we've always had, or the lack of opportunities that we've always lacked to be able to prevent that kind of, I don't think this is going to make a difference as to, we're not going to see a bunch of multifamilies spring up because there's another financing option. I guess I just don't see it happening. I understand what you're saying. But this is almost more the afterthought. Okay, this is what we want to do. Comes in front of council. Can we do it in this place, in this zone, in this, that? Yes, we can. Okay, now how are we going to pay for it? And this is an option to pay for it.
And one other thing you mentioned, Joe, sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. I was done.
And Shelley mentioned it can go on their taxes if they're not paying. It can be a lien. It's a lien on the property anyway. And I would guarantee that a bank is not going to go 3 years before they start foreclosure on the property. So whether it's a tax lien or just a lien they have on the property itself, they're going to take action on the collateral position they have, the security position they have. So again, I don't see it as a huge issue either, but we may see some activity, we may not. But as Aaron said, do we want to have it in place just in case? And if we don't like it, we can end it.
This does allow it to supersede some of the other things that would supersede other mortgages. So it does put it in like the first standing.
But my point is,
Right.
if a lender's owed money, they're going to foreclose
They're-
even if
Yeah.
it's going to go to taxes.
Will council be made aware of any applications? Is that part of the process? Not to vote on them, but do we get made aware of those?
We can put that in the guidebook.
I think that'd be great when we're talking about whether we're getting what we want out of it or not.
Just keep us posted.
Definitely.
Okay, I guess I can agree to that. Not that anyone cares what I agree to or don't agree to, but.
We do.
So You just need, again, I would suggest we probably have a motion to direct staff to move forward with this, Phil.
So moved.
Second.
Getting tired of doing your work, Joe. Motion second. Further discussion. All those in favor? I'm sorry, roll call. Let's do it. We're not adjourning yet. Roll call.
Davis,
Aye.
Stigleader,
Aye.
Blue,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thanks.
Thank
Good
you.
questions. Thanks, Shelley. Next item, impact fee study phase 1 report.
Mayor and Council, Bob Seal, Community Development Director. I'm just up here to introduce folks, and then I'll let them take it. But I just wanted to touch base and say that Welchcomer was contracted with last year in order to take us through this process. Starting in February of 23, we had updated the impact fees the last time. And at that time, we had discussed that there were certain things that we wanted to pursue, kind of look at, which was the idea of scaling residential fees or districting, or whether or not we should be charging for impact fees for parks to commercial structures. So that was part of this process for the update for the impact fee phase 1. And again, this was just looking at methodologies and how we process the impact fees. After Melissa is done presenting, Melissa and Todd Chase is also on via Teams with FCS. After they're done presenting, I'm going to be asking that you give me a nod or a nay as to move on to phase 2, which would actually be looking at the fees themselves. So, and that would be tying in the current CIP programs as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Melissa.
And then I just control this like normal, just arrow buttons. Okay. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Melissa Cleveland from Welchcomer Engineers, and I think I've met some of you, but not all of you, because this isn't the first time that I've been here talking about this topic. But I think that we're at the end now of phase 1. So like Bob mentioned, I had 2 teammates. FCS Group is a financial firm. I think you're familiar with them. I think they've done rate studies for you and such. So they will do the financial side of this that actually develops the fees. And then we also worked with Iteris. You're probably familiar with them as well because they're also working on the team that's doing your transportation master plan. And they run the regional transportation demand model. And that's important because we pull data out of that for the transportation component of these fees. So phase 1 that we're in now, we worked a lot with staff in various departments, and then we also worked quite a bit with the Planning and Zoning Commission because they were acting as the Development Impact Fee Committee that's required by law. And so we've worked through various aspects of the methodology and alternatives. And like Bob mentioned, this isn't actually developing the fees, it's kind of setting the groundwork for the way we want to calculate the fees and develop the report in the next phase. So we looked at growth, and then we looked at methodology associated with public safety, parks, transportation. Then we also looked at potentially a city core zone, scaling fees for mostly single-family residential, smaller fees for smaller houses type thing, looking at some of those non-residential fees, multimodal, there's a separate fee for multimodal now, considering just wrapping that in, and how to escalate the fees annually so that you don't kind of get behind. Then the next phase that we're hoping to work on in this next bit of time is looking at the detailed impact fee CIPs for each, and then preparing the calculations in the report and helping you implement them. So just in general, these fees are based on what is the eligible cost of a capacity increasing facility, whatever that might be. and then divide that by the growth in system capacity. So that the CIP is kind of the top part of that, and what we've kind of been working on is the denominator, this growth number. And that's how you come up with your charge. That's a really simplified version, but that's how it is. So what we've been considering, this is your existing fee schedule. What we've been considering is with your parks fee, you currently only charge it to residential, which is fine. But you can consider wrapping in non-residential and lodging into that as a way to maybe make it more equitable, and then also maybe reduce the fee for the single family if that was a desire of yours. Also looking at scaling the single family fee. Right now it's per dwelling unit, and it doesn't have to be. It could scale and be a lower fee for smaller houses. I think also right now you don't charge for accessory dwelling units, but if you scaled the fee, then you could, because they would just have a lower fee. It wouldn't have to be zero. These are all things that you can just consider, and you don't have to make a decision tonight. They're all just kind of laid out in both those memos that we prepared, and just kind of trying to explain what's going into all of that. Right now, you have, like I said, you have a separate multimodal fee for sidewalks and trails and shared use paths, things like that. So we're looking at wrapping that into either transportation or parks. And then also just looking at the different land uses and how you charge the fee, and working through, are those the right land uses? Is it a bit too many? Could they be combined? Trying to keep it as simple as possible for those that have to use the fee or figure out what fee they fall under if they're a developer, while also being fair and equitable. So this is the map that I wanted to show you. The blue is the planning boundary. That's what's used in the transportation master plan, because the model can't have all those little intricacies of what the city limits are. And it also can't really have holes in it. And you know that you have bits of your area that are still county. And so the blue is the planning area, and then the black line is the city limits, and then the red is what was considered to be this city center core that may be considered as a separate fee zone. The thought was, if we run through this in phase 2 and the city core zone ends up being a little bit lower in fees, that maybe it would encourage development in the core.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
And when we're looking at moving fees, is it the case that if we decide to, say, add a parks impact fee to commercial properties, does that necessarily decrease it on residential, so we have the same total amount of dollars coming in because it's coming from the growth equation?
Right.
Or does adding that fee actually increase the amount of revenue we're getting from impact fees?
No, it would, the pie is the same, okay, and it's just figuring out how to slice it up.
Okay.
So, I won't bore you with the details, but we went kind of round and round and round on how to look at these population growth forecasts. As you probably know, KMPO does forecasting for the region. And where we settled was using what they have right now published as the 2025, 2035 estimates. Those are lower than the planning area that's in that, what I showed you in blue, which makes sense because that planning area is bigger. So I just, we did that for consistency's sake, because I know that there's some other planning documents that you're going to undertake as well, and then that number isn't confusing later on. Why did we use the planning boundary versus the city limits boundary? And then you can see the growth rates that are associated with that. They're high, but Post Falls has experienced pretty high growth, even higher than that in some years recently. And then you can see the core is not expected to grow quite as fast, but still a pretty high growth rate. So this, I think in the memo, we go into the existing methodology, and then we have tables later on that kind of describes what we're recommending, move on. So getting into parks, there's two types of eligible parks. There's the new parks, and then there's expansion of existing parks. And those parks, we have to figure out how much is for serving the existing users and how much is to serve growth. Impact fees can only be charged on growth share of everything. So looking at your current level of service based on the most recent acreage that we received from city staff. So you currently have a level of service for all parks of 19 acres per 1,000 residents. And how you can use that is justify your future amount of parks that you can develop, purchase land and develop into different types of parks to serve your new forecasted population in 2035.
Be the same percentage?
Yep, it would. And so you're a little under on, let me look. You're a little under on level 1, which is like a developed park, and level 2 is more of a natural park. You're a little over on that, which makes sense because you might acquire land and not develop it at the same rate that you would. You might have land and not developed it yet. And so staying in line with your current level of service, you could justify having 343 acres of parks in 2035, which is a big number, so I think you're fine. So the other part of what's going into all of this methodology is looking at this non-residential component. And why would we even consider that? Well, it's because you have quite a bit of people that come into the city every day to work that don't live here. So they're not your residents, but they're here all day. And would they use a park while they're here? So that's the reason for it. Doesn't mean that we have to end up doing it in phase 2, but that's why we're looking at it. And then we worked through some calculations with planning and zoning and staff and figured out the different, time periods that an employee would have to use parks versus a resident, and kind of came up with that there's 3 jobs equal 1 resident. So 3 jobs, the demand on the park system is 1 resident, if that makes sense. And then kind of also looking at it from a visitation standpoint, what would be the demand on your parks from people that are in lodging, hotels, motels, RVs. So what we were looking at in the memo, there's a lot more detail, and I didn't want this to be a 2-hour presentation. So I'm kind of pointing out some things that I want you to pay attention to. So right now, your fee is based on straight level of service, and it's a little more defensible if you can get to a CIP-based fee. And so we've talked with the Parks Department about kind of having a hybrid. Like there are certain things that they can't know with certainty that still need to be level of service based. And that might be land acquisition. You might not know where an opportunity is going to come up. But then there are other things that can be, definitely CIP based, like we need X number of basketball courts by 2035, that type of thing. So we're going to kind of work with them in phase 2 to move in the direction of a CIP, but still have a hybrid type of approach. Another one I wanted to point out, looking at the impact fee cost allocation and kind of looking at how we're applying that fee to single family and multifamily, and then also how we might apply that to residential and non-residential.
Can I ask?
Yes.
It's a little ways back.
Oh, yeah, yep. And feel free to interrupt me as I'm going to.
So are we saying that, so we're saying currently for every 1,000 residents, we have 19 acres of park presently today.
Mm-hmm. Total, not all of them are developed. Some of it's just land you own.
Which I'm guessing that's inflated to some degree because of our community forest that is undeveloped and huge and
Yes.
lovely, my favorite
Yes.
thing, like I said.
So that's a
all the time.
level 2 park.
Right, okay, great. So then we're anticipating this 22,500 change in 10 years. Why would we not want to plan for the 400,000 extra acres? Because it seemed like, right, because it'd be 22 times 19.
Divided by 1,000, because it's per 1,000.
So it'd be
Okay,
22.
not 22,000. Well, so it'd still be 427 acres?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, it sort of seemed like maybe you didn't think that that's what we should plan for because that was too much.
Because you're currently kind of under on some of your level of service you have a policy, but then you're a little bit under on your level 1 parks. So we can't make up for a deficiency with impact fees, but you can, you can still grab all of that current level of service. So even if you're a little bit under on your level of service today.
But that's just the land, right? That's just the number of acres.
Right.
So we couldn't plan to buy if we're looking at this, I would like to keep up the level of service that we have and not lose that. So I guess I would ask that we still shoot for that.
Okay.
in the CIP.
Well, we'll do the best that we can while keeping it still a justifiable number. So we can't, as long as we're not making up for a current deficiency. We have looked at blending the two, and there's Todd. Hi, Todd. Do you want to help answer this question?
Can you hear me? I'm not
Yes.
sure if you can.
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah, you can certainly plan for more than what the current level of service says you have, but you can't pay for more than your existing levels of service with impact fees. And that's why it's nice to have the CIP-based approach.
Okay, I
You
think
just
that
have to
makes
find
sense.
a new funding.
That makes sense.
That makes sense to me. If we're behind on level of service, then the impact fees can only make the new areas up to the same level of service we actually have, and not our target.
Right, because it's growth share, that's what the impact fee is. So you can't make up for what the existing residents are a little behind on with impact fees. Doesn't mean you can't have another way of making that up, but.
So we should really quick catch up on level of service and then calculate the impact fees, right?
You could do that. You could. 100 acres laying around. Okay. Let's see. There were just some questions about the fees if scaled by home size. Like today, just to give you guys kind of a feel for what that might mean, these are just the parks fees. And so just kind of taking an average size of an ADU or a cottage or a standard home and kind of looking at how that might adjust. And so that's why that was in the memo, just to kind of give you an idea. So ADUs aren't currently charged, so of course that would go up, but the cottage would go down, the standard home wouldn't change, but the estate would go up.
This seems like probably the most important area for us to be looking at to me, because we have the code for kind of starter homes that are smaller in size, and it's a fixed fee regardless of whether it's a small starter home or kind of an estate level multi-million-dollar home.
Right, and then it also allows for if somebody buys a small home and adds onto it a whole bunch, then you can charge, for that square footage. Right now, you probably wouldn't charge a thing because it's still just one dwelling unit.
Right.
So just a little more equitable.
Challenge I have, I guess, it's not that it's a real problem, but you could get a couple that moves into a very large home.
Yeah,
a huge home.
That's the way it goes.
They're going to pay a higher impact fee, and there might only be 2 of them. You can have a family with 6 kids move into a smaller home, and all 6 kids have cars. They're going to be using the roads. And so,
Yeah,
Guess I don't have a real
that's
problem. I don't see a lot of equity in that.
That's the trade-off, and they are based on average. We do have a graph later that just kind of shows how typically the number of people in a home goes up with size, but it caps out. You know, when you get to a really large home, you don't typically keep having more and more people in that home. So
I think, to your point, it's counterintuitive to me because if I am a family living in a small home with a small lot, my alternative for outside recreation is at a park. A large estate with a huge yard, I'll probably have my own play structure, not gonna impact the park as much. So it seems opposite to me.
But then you want to charge a higher impact fee on a smaller starter home, and then we are countering what we are trying to do in other conversations.
right, it's an interesting conversation, and it doesn't have to be decided now because I think in phase 2 we'll calc it both ways.
I
And
don't
then-
think there's a perfect methodology.
No.
I think it's take
Yeah,
a little bit
no,
here, give a little bit there.
I think my argument would be, I think it makes perfect sense to make it the same. Single-family unit dwelling, this is the fee.
Well, it probably could depend on the fee too, because if you've got a large estate on an acre, you're gonna be running a whole lot more water on it, keep the grass green.
Is that a
So-
park impact fee?
That wouldn't be parks, but we have other.
Right,
impact
it'd be
fees
other
besides parks,
fees,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, how granular do we wanna get?
That is
Well, this seems pretty specific to a park impact.
Right, I was just,
Yeah.
I was jumping ahead to other fees.
That's what
Yeah.
I would do as well.
I think as a general principle, if we have multiple valid ways to accomplish this, and that's really, as long as we have something that's reasonable and defensible, then it's gonna be valid. If we have multiple avenues, we should choose the one that benefits small families starting off, young families having their first few kids. I think that's kind of a family-friendly way to approach it. That would be my kind of guiding principle for, if there are multiple options, let's choose the one that's best for young families. And I think this does that with this change.
Okay, here's the current fees. Now, don't get hung up on these numbers because we haven't run the fees. These are just us trying to back into what your fees might look like if this is how you'd done it before. If you had non-residential and lodging included, and then I should have, let's see, I should have done a comparison, but it's not really that much lower for what we're finding for the residential fees to include those. So, I mean, it's still something I think it's really good to explore and to run it both ways in phase 2, and then you guys can decide if it's worth it or not. But it's not seeming like it's creating a whole lot of impact for you guys.
Melissa, the other thing to note on that is that this is showing a RV fee and a lodging fee per room, which I don't think the city currently charges.
That's correct. So
That's
then,
one,
new RV parks or hotels would get charged a parks fee, and they're not currently. And that's something that you can do, but you don't have to.
at the time of building or every time someone stays there?
At the time of building permit. All of these fees are charged it's a part of their building permit fees.
Okay,
So it'd be per room or per
sure.
space?
A room that's used
Yeah.
over and
Yeah.
over and over again.
Right,
Or RV space.
Okay.
right.
That becomes a tax.
Right, some communities decide that that's not something that they want to do, and some decide that, heck yeah, we want to charge those guys. So it just depends on what you guys want to do, and we'll run it both ways.
It makes sense to me. If somebody is visiting on vacationing or they're in an RV or a hotel, they're not spending their day doing work. They're probably seeing the town. They're going to be in parks or on the streets or something. So I would expect they would have more impact than somebody who's living and working per person.
Right.
Absolutely.
What we did when Todd and I did Coeur d'Alene's latest update was in phase 2, we kind of compared some like recent development projects that you've had, and here was the fee they were charged. Here's this fee if we did it this way. Here's their fee if we did it this way, just so you can get some context. So I'll probably do the same type of thing for you. Sometimes some of this is a little ambiguous without the actual numbers. Okay, can we move on to police?
I guess.
Okay, so we One thing that we did, we were asked to do, was to pull incident responses and kind of determine if it looked like, you know, what percentage of incident responses was to residential or to commercial. And it's about, we found it's not a perfect science because we had to do it by zoning, and sometimes there's residential in some of the zoning, and you know. But anyway, it seemed like it was about a 90% to 10% mix. And then also running through it this other way, which is what we would recommend doing, looking at the just people and jobs that are projected. We were coming up with very similar numbers. So that was something that planning and zoning, we presented this table to planning and zoning first, and then they asked us to kind of ground truth it with incident responses. So we felt like this is pretty accurate as far as how to slice up that pie again into residential and non-residential. Right now, we've looked at just public safety level of service assumptions. Just like parks, we would like the public safety to have a CIP or a hybrid of some sort. But this is what we've found is justifiable from an impact fee eligible cost that we could associate in the next phase. But we are going to work with the police department on a CIP.
I'd like to just make sure everyone understands. For the impact fees, the position is that we cannot use an impact fee for operational costs.
Correct, and no vehicles, anything like that, no maintenance, unfortunately.
We're asked
It's
by
just
the jurisdiction to participate, and they included things that our legal counsel advises were not includable. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that. It's not for ammunition, it's not for operational costs.
correct.
Thank you.
Yep. I don't think I have much to go over with you here, except that what I just said is that we would like to have the police fee also be CIP based for the most part in the next phase. So we'll work with them on that. Most everything about your public safety fee, we're kind of just recommending to use the same methodology you're using now. Transportation, there is the thought to consider a city center fee zone, and we talked about that already. And here's the map again, and here's a little bit more zoomed in on the map. If you have questions about why this shape, mostly we worked with staff on this, but it also like lines up with some of the traffic analysis zones in the model, because we have to have a boundary that we can pull trips out of. So if it doesn't seem like the perfect boundary, that's why. And so you have trip growth forecast from 2025 to 2035 that we pull out of the model. And then we also have the core from that boundary in red for the rest of the city. Multimodal growth assumptions. When I presented before, that we got kind of hung up on this part here, and what I want to point out here is that I don't even think that we're going to use this, because we're probably only going to have facilities that either get put into the transportation fee or get put into the parks fee. So this would be if you had some random project that didn't go logically into parks or transportation, and I don't believe that you have any yet. So I don't know that we need to spend a bunch of time on this, but it's how we would deal with it if we came across one.
So we just put all of the multimodal and bicycle paths into the transportation CIP and factored in that way?
Yep, that's what we're recommending. I think it's just a lot simpler, and it also doesn't leave you with this like pot of money that's really hard to figure out what to do with. Right, so if it's just in with the transportation, then if you build a road and it has a shared use path along it, you build that too. Or if you're building a park and it has trail around it or through it, then you build that too. I think currently it's a little bit like, well, what do we spend this money on?
Right.
That trail out, like is it the Prairie Trail? Mm-hmm. That's part of the Mr. Paulus? That's transportation.
It's currently in our multimodal. But it would end up in the transportation and going forward.
Or parks.
It would, and it
That
would.
one's actually one that we'll probably actually put in parks.
Okay, okay.
But we want to make sure that we tie them into a CIP
Yeah.
more than anything.
Because that
so
one's
it's
not in
less
a park,
ambiguous.
and it's also not on a road.
Right, but it's a
okay.
park type of function.
Deal, all right.
That's how we look at it.
We will specifically list it and it will end up in one of the CIPs. So it'll be clear and it won't be like, where is this one? You know? So don't have the answer yet, but it'll be clear which way it's going.
Part of the reason we're doing this is we want to avoid double dipping. So if it's not clear which bucket it ends up in, you end up accidentally charging for both. You've overfeed something. And so by being pretty specific about which bucket it goes into and eliminating this as a separate category, we eliminate that option so that it just doesn't happen.
And then it's also less complicated if a developer is building facilities and trying to get credits, which is a whole other conversation. But like if they're building sidewalks in their development because they have to, it's part of your city code, but now they're saying, but I should get a credit because of this multimodal fee, and everyone's saying, no, you shouldn't. It's an extra complication that you don't need.
I can't imagine that this gets any more complicated, quite
Pretty intense.
It's really fun. Okay, so just running through these alternatives, we've talked about that we're recommending a CIP-based plan, and it's great because you're finishing up your transportation master plan kind of later this summer, and so it'll be fresh and ready to go. And then let's see, we're looking at wrapping some of the multimodal into the fee, into the transportation fee, and yeah, I think that's we've already kind of covered all of these things. And then talking about credits, which we just kind of got into a little bit, but just being super clear in the report that comes in phase 2, what are eligible for credits, so that staff and the attorneys don't have to argue with every developer on what's in the fee and what are they eligible for credits on. Because this is a type of facility that developers end up building quite often. Okay, scaling by home size. So we have this graph here, and that's what's showing that there's kind of this linear relationship between the house size going up and the number of occupants going up. But it does cap out around 3,500 square feet. And of course, it's not perfect. This is on average. So you do occasionally have the, one couple that lives in a 5,000 square foot house. But that's just kind of the way it goes. And this is your total fees now if you were scaling today. So kind of the same thing that we looked at before, but this is the total, not just parks. And I don't know if anyone had any questions on that or if we hit that pretty hard in parks. I also just wanted to really quickly, we are looking to simplify the land use categories, and we went through this with planning and zoning in detail, but just combining some things that just seemed like it's difficult to know sometimes if a development is this or that, is it light industrial or manufacturing, or is it distribution? And so having all these different categories makes it kind of hard for people to figure out how to estimate their own fee, for one, and then how staff to apply it consistently. And so we looked at combining some things, and then just combining some similar uses like schools and daycares. We are considering still if church should be a separate fee from those two, which we can run both ways in phase 2, and then having like assisted living and nursing homes be combined as well, because a lot of times they're in the same facility too. Yeah, and then just kind of combining all the commercial type development into one by the square foot. And then I think you do a lot of this already, but we're recommending that you work in an annual escalation so it keeps up with the current construction costs. Recommend kind of the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index or something else that's published that you can point to. And that allows the fees to increase with inflation, and it also allows the development community to kind of get a feel for what the fees will be maybe 2 years from now or something like that if they're trying to forecast. So the next steps would be in phase 2, we'll work on those CIPs that we talked about for each of the different fees, calculate the fees, then prepare the study. The process is you adopt the fees, then you adopt the report, and then you adopt the fee schedule. What other questions can Todd or I answer?
Yeah, I've got one. We looked at the downtown area as being different a little bit. Obviously, like the idea behind that would be if you live downtown, you probably drive fewer miles on average than somebody who lives on the outskirts. Is there enough of a difference to really justify having a district there with different impact fees for being downtown versus further out?
I don't know yet. I don't think I will know until we see the projects that are on the CIPs and we can attribute like a certain percentage to core versus the rest of the city and kind of run the math. I think it may not be just because the growth numbers aren't super high in the core, but the growth numbers in the core are projected to be a little lower percentage than the rest of the city. So, but I don't know. Todd, what do you think?
We'll just have to see. If most of the future projects are outside the core and most of the growth is outside the core, there will be a pretty big difference between what we charge for transportation in the core versus transportation elsewhere. So I think our proposal is to come back to you with both calcs, so you can see it with one unified citywide transportation fee and one where you have a different fee in the core versus non-core. And we'll discuss that.
Oh,
sorry, I was trying not to
I
scare
feel
you.
fear out of my mind.
No. What I have to say kind of about the different alternatives is that I think that it's been a good exercise to start to look at them closely. I do believe that we will be able to make a better determination at the next phase because we'll be able to see how it actually affects the fees. At first blush, it may not look like the downtown core makes any sense. Additionally, whether or not to do the non-residential parks impact fees will have to be weighed. The value of how much does it decrease a single family home if you're charging an additional $500,000 for a hotel. So we'll have to look at how those numbers flesh out. And I think that that's part of it. And I'm glad that we did this exercise. I'm glad we're looking at this. And I think it will be more, you'll be able to see how it all applies in the next round. So.
Okay, 'cause it would make sense to me that we're going, like most of the capital improvements we need to do to accommodate growth for roads are going to be the arterials outside of the city core.
Yes, and and when Todd started running the numbers of where the growth is happening, the majority of the growth is outside the city center. Because of that, when you start to balance it out, because there is still an impact on parts of the city from the growth in the city center.
Right.
And the one that was likely to be modified is the transportation impact fee, whereas it wouldn't really affect the police impact fee, and it probably wouldn't affect the parks impact fee. So we may not see enough of a difference in order to implement that. We wanted to, but
some of the, not just the downtown core, but looking at some of these fees, if we have zones or whatever, that could encourage more infill, which is what council has said they want, as opposed to extending beyond the city periphery. So again, it's not just in the downtown core area, but there may be opportunity to lower fees to solicit and encourage infill.
we'll have to see.
Joe, did you have?
He beat me to it. It's exactly what I was gonna say. I was surprised that downtown core was so small, because one thing we've talked about is getting the infill in, and there's already roads, there's already sewer running right by it, there's already all these things, as opposed to encouraging sprawl, because that's where all the large plots of property are on the periphery.
Right, and as Melissa noted, we developed the downtown core. It's mostly based on the current urban renewal district boundary and the city center plan boundary, and then we bumped it up to 15th Avenue along Spokane and Idaho, up to that area, because it all kind of ties together, because a lot of that area is, it greatly benefits from any improvements in the downtown area. They also probably residents are likely to consider themselves as from downtown Post Falls, because you're in an easy walking distance to downtown. And so it just kind of created its own boundary, so.
So, you're talking about CIP versus a hybrid model. So the CIP, Capital Improvement Project, correct? Is that accurate? Okay. So when we do it that way, and we're talking about putting different projects in different buckets and then charging, I guess my question is, are each of those projects a line item, and then when we get the impact fee, $100 goes to this one and $2 goes to this one and whatever?
No, you don't have to do that. You don't have to. You probably won't be able to build everything on your CIP, because the impact fees won't necessarily pay for all of it. So there's going to have to be fees that come from elsewhere as well. So if you have a project and it's on the impact fee CIP, you can use impact fee CIPs to build that project. Okay. You don't have to wait
till that.
No, because you would never ever get done then. Yeah.
Well, this is good information, and as Samantha said, this is very confusing. It's very detailed. I will say that when we first started impact fees, we got a ton of pushback, and we don't see that now. It's become a expected cost of doing business, and I think we're the highest in the area. And you think, well, that's going to slow things down. It hasn't. And so I'm all for reevaluating the process, reevaluating the dollar amounts, and we'll just see what happens. But again, I think it's good information that you presented, and I would look forward to see what you bring back in phase 2.
Great, thank you.
That leads us to that last final question. You okay with me bringing back a contract in the coming month for phase 2? I don't have that yet. We're working on finalizing the scope and the costs of.
Well, I think it would be ludicrous for us to have spent the time and the effort to get to this point and then just say no.
Yeah. Can I ask Mr. Seal that when we do that though, we get, can we have a number of, I was thinking about it while we were doing it. I appreciate your time, and I'm sure that you put a lot of work into it, and I'm sure that neither of you are particularly cheap. So, can we have what we're spending on going through all of this and that effort versus what benefit that money is having to the city? Does that make sense?
The impact fees are paying for this study, as an example.
Okay.
It's built into the impact fees. Sorry, I felt like the music was telling me to stop and sit down.
Remember that in his review, please.
We do, we provide, it's probably about time for an update, but we have provided in the past a presentation on how much impact fees were collected over the past year, what projects were funded.
Gotcha.
On that. I know that John Manley was planning on doing a presentation for that, and sometimes he tries not to tie it in during certain periods of time during the year, because he doesn't want to confuse the process where he's talking about, this is what we've done in the past with the impact fees, as we're talking about, hey, we want to update the impact
Tonight's
fees.
probably not the night that I would request an additional presentation on what are, but I
John's
think
already gone home for the evening.
it would just, I would just like to, or if they come out of impact fees, then that actually answers my question. I was more concerned if they came out of the general fund. So.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, I should ask, do you want a motion to?
I think I would go ahead and take a motion
secret
to
ballots aren't gonna
authorize staff
Thumbs
to
up,
proceed forward with phase 2.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Stigleder,
Aye.
Blue,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Good information. Thank you all. Let's get through the next two items, and we'll take a quick break. Next item up is the memorandum of understanding with City of Rathdrum from the Seltice Way Rehab Project. And it was really fun watching your face.
Yeah, excuse me, Mayor and members of council for the outburst, and good
It was a
evening.
nice tune, anyway.
Yeah, it's I'll tell you a joke at the end of the presentation. It's my diet routine, actually. Quit eating at 8 o'clock. Okay, well, yes, Jackson Fleshman, project manager, City of Post Falls, tonight to present to you two separate items. It's actually the next two items on your agenda, a little 2-for-1 special. Our Seltice Way Rehabilitation and Pipeline Project, a memorandum of understanding with the City of Rathdrum, as well as contract amendment number 2 with JUB Engineers. So where is this project at? It is along Seltice Way between McGuire and Chase. And this project started as just a streets rehabilitation project, quickly grew into a whole host of pipeline work needing to be done, trying to get as much work done in this area while we're ripping it up as we can. And part of that is we went and had discussions with other entities in the area, one being a good example is East Green Acres Irrigation District, which John Beecham just presented to you guys on a few council meetings ago, memorandum with them. Another entity is the City of Rathdrum. And I threw this little diagram together to show what work they would have included as a part of this project. So that green line, I maybe got a little too literal with where the pipelines are, it's hard to see, but that green line is a future City of Rathdrum 16-inch transmission line that would travel down to our wastewater reclamation facility. So if you don't know, or those of you who may not know, the City of Rathdrum's wastewater is treated by the City of Post Falls. And to accommodate future flows, part of their master plan identifies the need for a 16-inch force main upgrade. A lot of benefits here, a little bit of a win-win situation for both cities. One of the first ones is just using the same design engineers in JUB. Some efficiencies there, reduces cost. Plans are set. It's the same engineer talking with each other. This decreases the likelihood of, I don't want to say future projects, maybe I should say near future projects in this corridor. We'd hate to do this project and then the City of Rathdrum come in 2 years later and put their line in. So also helps and decreases potential for conflicts within the construction zone while we're constructing. As a part of this, the same contractor for our project will perform the work for City of Rathdrum, assuming all this moves through, which will help with efficiencies there. And this memorandum helps establish roles and responsibilities for both parties. Is kind of like a mini contract between the two of us. A couple conditions, or existing condition pictures for Seltice Way. And the second part of the presentation is JUB's contract amendment. And I should have mentioned this. Here's the cherry on top for you. The design amount and all costs incurred by the city for this work will be reimbursed as a part of the memorandum of understanding with the City of Rathdrum. But to put a dollar value to it, the design cost for this work is going to cost $48,900. As I mentioned, it designs Rathdrum's force main from our water reclamation facility to just north of the McGuire-Seltice intersection. And as next steps, I would likely come to a future meeting with the contract amendment for construction management services. Next steps, we're continuing through design through this fall, likely to bid this winter, moving into construction next spring. And I'll bring it up just because it was mentioned at the last meeting regarding this project. Two-season approach likely, but there will always be roadway available. There's a 2-lane roadway planned for Seltice for traffic purposes while construction's happening. Questions?
Questions, Jackson?
We'll continue working with Rathdrum, like as the project goes and we keep having other contracts.
Yeah. So that MOU lines out a lot of steps that we need to take for, let's say there's a change order or something else happens in the contract. There's a lot of communication between the two of us.
Okay.
That will need to occur.
I move to approve the memorandum of understanding with the city of Rathdrum for the Seltice Way Rehabilitation Program.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Clue,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Stigleader,
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thanks, council.
Do you need another motion on the contract amendment?
I move to approve the Seltice Way Rehabilitation Contract Amendment with JUB Engineers.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Malloy,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Clue,
Aye.
Motion passes. And we have a few items left, so let's take a 5-minute break. That works, everyone? Call the meeting back to order. Next item we're dealing with is new business, and the first is construction improvement agreement, Montrose Sports Complex.
Mayor, council, members of the council, Dave Fair, Director of Parks and Recreation. Tonight I'm actually going to be covering A, the construction improvement agreement, and B, the impact fees amendment together, as they go hand in hand, and they're simple, or straightforward at least. The location of this is, of the Fieldworth building, is to the east of the Orgill building off of Empire Way. And that original PUD required the developer to build 2 baseball fields and some neighborhood parks. And that started in the mid-1990s. And since then, there's been a lot of changes. There's been different changes in size, location, a little bit of everything. And this is one I really wanted to get done before I retire. So we've been pushing hard. What is going to happen there with this project is 2 softball fields, 114 parking stalls, which is oversized for that, but we plan to add additional phases into it. Main asphalt entrance, pathways around the perimeter, landscaping, irrigation, site improvements of utilities will also include future stuff, so stub ins, conduit, that type of thing. And then a gravel maintenance yard. The project itself is a cost that's been bid at this point through, the developer has the bids, of $2,135,850.56. And if you had told me a few years back that's the cost of 2 softball fields, I wouldn't have believed you, but it is. The developer's obligation to that is just over $2 million, leaving a shortfall of $83,366, which would then become our department's obligation. In addition to that, go ahead, Samantha.
Why is the developer's obligation not the total of the project if that's what was agreed to be built in the PUD?
Because we also got land in exchange for some of this, so there were things that offset. And what we did is we took the value of all the impact fees that were waived to cover it. So this was what we felt was a win-win. There's another reason for that. What bumped us up over is we're replacing the sidewalk along Empire Way, a portion of that. We also asked for a bigger parking lot, so we didn't have to come back and do additional construction on it. The cost of fencing just went through the roof. And then we also asked for, instead of wood mulching, to go to a rock mulching like you would see at down at Camille Park. So there are things that the city required. There are things that our department requested.
Requested?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
And then we're also asking for a contingency of 3% over the total project. And part of that is it's a tight timeline. We're trying to have the grass in and growing by fall. And we're looking at possibility of some different ways of installing the backstops and the fencing, the outfield fencing. They're extremely tall. They have huge footprints, and that impacts all the utilities, irrigation. So we're looking at some of those, and we're in discussion. It may not happen, but we want to keep it on track. So that's why we see that. Okay. The funding for this will come out of park impact fees. One of the things I'd like to let you know is we already have a park improvement agreement that was signed on April 16th of 2019. And that really spelled out some of these obligations. It handled what land we were getting given to us, what we were buying, everything in there. And then all of that information went into the design work, which has been reviewed and approved by the city. The construction agreement simply is a mechanism for the developer to, Kootenai too, to continue construction, and then for us to reimburse them, like we've seen with the Foxtail and a few others that are coming forward. And I've already covered what kind of pushed it up over. And then the second item, the impact fee amendment, it is simply allowing the city to charge for park impact fees now that the developer's obligations have been met. So it just gets us back on track, so we won't be waiving any more park impact fees in the Montrose development. And then I'm just asking for the council for your approval on both items and authorization for the mayor to sign. So I'm now open for any additional questions.
Just like to make a comment. The Golden Retriever is very disappointed with this project. We walk that every day and they're going 100 miles an hour, but we just see that big area that he runs like crazy. We go by this, they're making good progress. They'll do a nice job.
Yeah.
But yeah, my dog's not happy.
Please. This is my legal counsel, by the way.
Council, Chris Gabbard. Just for a little bit of additional context on this one, there were existing agreements that have been on the books for a long time. It seems like the original Montrose agreement was they would build X in certain locations to be determined, and in lieu of paying the park impact fees, they would be doing X, Y, and Z. Those things never really happened because of changes in ownership, changes in site plans, and everything else. So they weren't being charged impact fees for this period. So in light of the fact that they have now developed and are dedicating this park and 2 other parcels which were adjacent to the school district, the city has penciled it out to figure out the amount of the impact fees to which they would have charged up to June of this year, and have basically put a number to that, and is approximating these developments and the other land dedications to that number of the previously waived fees. The additional $83,000 is additional costs that the city wants to see in that, and they're entitled to recover that money from the existing impact fees. So starting June 1st, any other development in Montrose will now be charged an impact fee moving forward. So basically, we're in agreement that what they've done in the past and to date satisfies that prior obligation. Then moving forward, it'll be treated like any other project. So that's what these amendments are trying to do. And like I said, the construction improvement agreement, like Dave talked about, allows them to make that improvement, liquidates the amount that they can recover from our current impact fees, and basically buttons up this project.
As far as the collection of new impact fees, are good with that as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I guess if this makes you feel a little bit better that we're not getting the short end of the stick, through all these negotiations, say over the last probably 5 years, before probably 18, there was land there that was in question of whether we would get it, whether it'd go back to the developer. We got that, and that was part of also with the purchase to get a bigger footprint. So we actually ended up with all of the public land. So that wasn't a charge. We needed additional, which we did get, and we paid for that. But I think we came out with the best win-win situation we could with a developer who's been very good to work with.
So the original contract was in 1996, is that what the packet said?
I think that's when it was approved, yeah.
Yeah, but then the terms of that contract haven't been met in almost 30 years, and now we're trying to shore that up.
And maybe that's why I'm up here, because I'm probably one of the few that's been around that whole time.
Yeah.
My memory gets, okay, Joe probably too, and Ron definitely, so I'm not sharing it all. But it was based on phasing. And phasing kept getting changed. They went to 3A, 3B, all these different things. And then how they laid out the development changed a little bit there too. So it wasn't that they weren't meeting, not trying to meet it, but they just didn't hit those phases which triggered it.
But in the meantime, the nice thing is they did put in parks.
Yeah. HOA parks.
Yeah.
They did give us 2 acres next to the school, and originally that was where the Little League ball fields were supposed to go, but it also anticipated utilizing some of the school district fields. And the school district, when they got to building that, it didn't fit their needs. So it's fenced off and stuff. So we adjusted it. We looked at making that more into a neighborhood park that connects to the railway line that goes through there. anticipating that at some date in the future, it'll be closed off and not used, and then open maybe for public land. So there's always been a lot of moving parts, but like I said, I wanted to get this done before I retired.
I mean, it looks good. I guess not to be a bug about it. I think one of the things that we hear often from residents, or that I hear, is that there are these big contracts that say something, or say that something's going to be done, and then after the fact, things change or things don't from an outside perspective, it looks very confusing and slightly untrustworthy. If this was a PUD from 30 years ago and the developer in that PUD said that this was going to happen, but then slowly here and there they redeveloped this and changed this street and what they wanted to build there.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it come back with development agreements changing, right? Or rezoning of sorts. So I'm not saying that anything nefarious was done. I'm just trying to be really clear about what happened and what we're saying is okay and what standard we're setting there, so.
And this is one that actually happened before impact fees were even around. They knew they were coming in, was negotiated by our planning department long before that.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't anything that was done wrong. It's the system, and part of it is sometimes it's so vague that unless you keep a lot of the manuals and the books that are like sitting in my office and the notes, it goes away. I think we've tried to tighten it up. There will never be a perfect system.
So, I'm sorry, clarify for me then, if there weren't impact fees in '96, what was it that they waived?
The city was working on them. The legislation had happened in the state that allowed it, so we knew we were going that direction. And they just got a jump about 6 months prior to.
To it going through?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So then now we will be assessing, levying, charging?
Correct.
Collecting impact fees for the rest
Park
of the.
impact fees.
Park impact
Yes.
fees for the rest of Montrose development, which is really to say that we'll be charging the people that are buying the houses, right, not the developer, those fees. I think a lot of the language that we've been using today makes it sound like the developer took on those fees and the developer is going to take them on again, but it's really the residents that will be taking them.
Even in the past, that was still getting passed on to the person buying the houses.
Yeah.
Permit fees are the same way, building
Yeah.
permit.
So from my standpoint and my staff standpoint, we feel very comfortable with what we've worked out. We think it's fair for all involved.
Were they given any discounts in density because of making this deal with the city, that they were gonna donate this land or agree to build these?
You could
Or
put me
not
on the
have
spot there with
impact.
memory. I don't believe there was any density issues that changed with it. It was purely the size of it. And
Okay.
as a PUD, there was land requirements, and then it was just a matter of, okay, this will become a HOA maintained for the public, and this is going to be a city.
Okay. Well, I want to give you things before you retire because I'm
Well, thank
sad,
you.
but
I have a
sorry,
whole
I don't-
list.
Any other comments, questions?
On that too, I understand there's reasons that we don't do big PUDs like this anymore because they always get switched around. There's too much flexibility to do density above the underlying zone and, build all the houses first and say, well, the apartments are gonna be over there, so everybody buys those houses and they stick them right there, so I hear you. We haven't done one of these big ones in a long time. I don't anticipate that we'll do it again.
And this is the only one that they ever waived the impact fees for.
Okay.
So I hear you.
But this, I'll say, being a neighbor to to this development, they've done it well. You know, I mean, they've delayed, they've not delayed, they've just waited until the different phasing comes in, but to my knowledge, they've got multifamily and it's where it was supposed to be, and I don't recall them doing anything to the contrary, and so I think this is a good situation. And the big thing, I go back to what you mentioned, similar to that, what always drove me nuts was when you get these developers would come in and promise parks. And then they build all the houses and no parks. So you buy a house, you've got kids, and they build a park when your kids are 20 and they're moved away. And we don't do that anymore. But these folks put the park in early. And matter of fact, it was one of the first things, because they used to chase a dog over there to try to get him back when he saw the people. And so they put the park in first and did what they were supposed to do. So I think this is a real win-win for the city.
Okay.
So you're gonna need two motions.
Please.
I move to approve the construction improvement agreement Montrose Sports Complex.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Flu.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Motion passes.
And I also move to approve the Montrose Park impact fee amendment.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Westland.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Flu.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Dave. Next up tonight is declaration of intent to exchange real property on the southwest corner of Mullan Avenue and Lincoln Street.
Real quickly, Dave, do you have a date set? No, I am not. Do you have a retirement date? I should be more specific.
End of the year, isn't it?
Is it end of this year?
So it'll be the end of the year.
Oh, wow, okay.
Mayor and Council, Bob Seal, Community Development Director, City of Post Falls. I feel like I never get up here, and then one night I get up here a bunch. That's the way it goes. So tonight I'm going to talk to you very briefly about the declaration of intent to exchange real property. And this is kind of a two-step process. I'm kind of introducing it tonight, and we'll at the end ask for a motion to potentially take it back to a public hearing. And it will follow the directions that we have here. You would potentially announce that we'll have a public hearing at least 14 days from today, and that public hearing date to be set. We'll look at it is this in the best interest of the city? We'll look at, there's likelihood that there's no value to the property due to the encumbrances. At that public hearing, we would announce the terms of the exchange, which I will kind of discuss tonight, and then allow for public comment. So the city owns, this is kind of the highlights of the presentation, the city owns a 0.2 acre piece of land along Mullan Avenue. It's on the north side of a property. I'll show you a map in a second. Currently, it is encumbered for the use and maintenance of a water line. No water line was ever located there. The adjacent landowner wishes to redevelop their parcel, and the city water line currently runs through the private property. The goal of this would be to exchange the unused city land over the easement for an existing water line. So the owner of the property is the John C. Young Family LLC. This is where My Favorite Things is currently located.
Oh, not your favorite things. I thought you were going to say
My favorite thing.
It was
No.
yours.
And the owners want to redevelop the parcel. They want to make improvements to the building as well as all the parking lots and provide a better loading dock in the rear. But as part of that, they also want to be able to provide better access across what is currently our property to access Mullan Avenue for truck circulation. In our early discussions on that, we were trying to find out what ways that they could be guaranteed to be able to have that type of access. And so we dug into this a little bit deeper and found that there was a water line that was running through the property, and back in 1980, you can see the water line is shown in that exhibit. Back in 1980, the city, John C. Young dedicated the land to the city for the purpose of the use and maintenance of a water line. However, as I noted, the water line was never located in that strip of land. The goal here, what we're anticipating, is that we would be releasing the land back to the original grantor. It is in the best interest of the city because we would now be able to get an easement over the existing water line and return the property to taxable land as well, so they can actually redevelop that parcel in the way that they wish to. Again, what I'd be looking for is a motion to set a hearing date and direct the city to publish notice. And I want to show you a quick image of the property in question. You can see the trees in the back. Those are mostly located within that strip of land. So with the improvements, we would also be seeing improvements to Mullan Avenue, as well as some along Lincoln Street and the building and parking lot. So,
Questions, Bob?
Any questions?
Do we typically have water lines running through somebody's property without an easement?
Most likely what this was an old alleyway, and they would running through, and the building was developed after the water line probably went in. This is just my guess on it. And that you kind of see that we just need an easement. You hope not. I mean, but it does happen because a lot of times they go in before that time period. So,
And then if they're building loading docks on the back and changing that, they, I assume, can't build on top of the easement.
They won't be able to build on top of the easement. They won't be able to build on top of the water line. If they go to modify the water line location, we will have the easement modified to follow the water line.
All right, so in theory, they could, reroute it, and then we would just move the easement if they needed
Correct.
to move it.
Yep. It didn't make sense to have the land up by the right-of-way because nothing else is also running in that area. There's no electric, there's no water, there's no sewer. So the location of the water line is unlikely to change drastically from its current trajectory, but it may be modified in order to redevelop the loading dock in the back. But we would just have them create a new easement for us.
So this one might need a little bit of help with the motion. The code section is a little bit complex from 1967.
So what would you suggest?
Yeah, if you were gonna say it.
Possible motion.
Well, so council needs to basically do a declaration of the intent to exchange the real property, and that explanation needs to have the intended exchange for something other than monetary consideration, which is what we're talking about here. And so that needs to be made on the record as part of the motion. So it's a declaration of an intent to exchange real property for a easement in lieu of monetary consideration.
So moved.
Well done. Second?
I don't know that we have to set the hearing date. The notice of the public hearing shall be published at least 14 days before.
Yeah, I think that it was intended that the motion would also include that you would also instruct staff to set a public hearing date at least 14 days from today, and that that hearing will be published.
Am I to assume that that's what you've said?
Further moved as such.
Second still stands?
Second stands.
So we've had a motion and second and clarification and confirmation of motion and second. Are there further discussions? Roll call, please.
Davis.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Flu.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Ross, thanks for hanging around. The next item up is a 2025 chip and fog seal contract.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. Ross Junkin, Public Works Maintenance Manager. I'm here once again to talk about our chip seal, our annual chip seal contract that we bid, and go over that with you. And I'm seeking approval to approve the bid and sign the contract. So we pre-qualified this contract, and we received for two qualified contractors only received one bid. The bid came in at $679,000 plus. The chart shows the last 5 years bids that have come back and those prices per square yard for the chips. As you can see, steadily gone up. Last year was kind of an anomaly. It jumped up quite a bit on the chip price. Our budget for chip seal, for sealing of our asphalt roads is $600,000. So this does go over that. But we plan to use the funds that we have in our street reconstruction budget line to cover any overruns, which we will have for this contract. With this year, we're going to do 8.58 miles, which you can see the percentage of our city streets that would cover. A little bit up from last year and previous years. We're trying to recoup some of the mileage that we lost a few years ago when prices were up, and we tried to stay within our budget, which was at $400,000 at that point. We would like to chip every 7 to 10 years, but that's pretty expensive, and we recognize that. So we're doing the best we can with the money that we've got. And you can kind of see some of the outlines that I've thrown here.
It's about 80,000 per mile. And to do our city at those interval rates, 7 years, it's pretty expensive to try and keep up. So I think you've seen this. Some of you have seen this slide before. This is a pavement condition study that we did in 22. It showed what the conditions of our roads, our streets were at that time. So that's 3 years ago. We're sitting pretty good. And we attribute that to the chip seal that we have done for the last 20 to 30 years in our city. So we want to continue that. I don't know if you've seen this slide. This is a picture showing green is good, red is not so good. That's what our city looks like based on those numbers from the previous slide. So we're in pretty good shape. And we're addressing some of these can't be fixed with chip seals. They have to be overlaid, and we're addressing those as we go through. But as we overlay, then we follow behind with chip seals and really seal it up and preserve that road for a significant amount of time. Chip seal is what we found to be the most cost-effective way to prolong our streets. One of the biggest things it does is it protects it from the sun, which in time turns it brittle, starts cracking, and you get water in it. Then you get freeze-thaw cycles, and then it just goes down from there pretty quickly. It also provides a traction layer, which we can use. It helps in winter driving. And so we continue to look ahead as well at our pavement condition and what our streets are doing in the future, what they'll look like in the future. So we will come back to you in a few years to ask for funds to do another pavement condition study. I think the first one was about $75,000 to the entire city, and it's all digitized with LiDAR. So they can see every single crack and really dive deep into it and give us a good assessment. So our recommendation is to award the contract to Po Asphalt, who was a low bid, sole bid, in the amount of $679,058. And I'm also asking for a 5% contingency of $33,000. So the total request is there, and I'll entertain any questions.
Is the contract, it's fixed price, so as petroleum products decrease in cost, our contract stays the same?
We see a fluctuation year to year. In talking to the contractors, a lot of it is rock pricing as well. But the oils, I've been told by various contractors that they can procure them the year before, and they stockpile them on site, and that's the pricing we usually see, is the price from the year before.
Well, I think it was about 5 years ago, I received several phone calls and actually went out and inspected chip sealing that was being done, and it was horrible. I know staff has done a great job in vetting the contractors and doing inspections, and I've not heard a complaint since then. It's been done very well.
Yeah, after that issue, we went to a pre-qualification, and we haven't had the issue since then, but we'll be diligent about it.
Any questions of Ross?
So if we were chip sealing every 7 years, we would be spending millions of dollars a year on it, which is obviously very expensive. But the idea of chip sealing is that that's less expensive than not doing it and then having to do surface reconstruction sooner, right?
Very much so, yes. Chip seal is, I don't have that figure in front of me, but it's multifold less in grinding and overlaying, and then a full rehab of a road is quite substantial, a cost to the city.
We do have people asking questions about why their road was chip sealed and others are being rebuilt, and it's because chip sealing still works on their road.
Correct,
Some
yes.
roads, as you say, can't be.
Some roads are past that, and it doesn't make sense to put a chip seal down on a road that needs a rehab and waste that money.
This looks concerning to me every year because just looking at the numbers, it looks like we're not taking care of our roads and then they're going to be falling apart and we'll have to spend more money ultimately doing the reconstruction. I like having most of the roads look green. I think that's good, but I think that's also partially because a lot of them are new. And I would expect we're going to start to see that shift more toward the orange over the next 5 to 10 years if we're on the same track that we're on now, right?
Yeah, we do add more roads with all the development, and we do look at that and try to chip seal those roads within a couple of years of those roads going down, so we can get them sealed. That's difficult to do, but we're doing the best we can with what we've got. I also get a number of calls every year from other cities in our area, Spokane, other side of the border, in our state, asking about our chip seal program because they see that it's working for us and they want to get in on it too.
Just out of curiosity, since you brought up other cities, do we know how other cities are doing with this? Is everybody doing a chip seal program like this?
Not everybody, no, but more and more are getting on board with it. I know in Washington, it's definitely not as well used, a tool. It's definitely our region. It's pretty well used. The highway district does it. They have an annual program as well. So it works for them as well.
Perhaps they could increase their gas tax, huh? So you need a motion.
I would move to approve the 2025 chip and fog seal contract with Poe Asphalt.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Stiglater.
Aye.
Plou.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you.
Next item up, Police Department parking lot improvements.
Pressure's on me. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Andrew Arbini, Projects Division Manager. This presentation this evening is a contract with HMH Engineering for the parking lot improvements at the police department. Some quick context. We met with the police department. When I say we, the Public Works Department and PD met to discuss this project, moving it forward a couple months ago. So the projects division is providing a supporting role to the police department in accomplishing the design and construction of this project. The police department headquarters was constructed in 2003. In 2021, the facilities assessment identified several needs, one of which is a current need for additional parking space. More recently, I believe in the last couple of years, the police department purchased about 2 acres just east of the existing site. The intent is that a portion of that property will provide the space needed for this parking lot improvement. The project includes a design and expansion of the secured parking facilities as well as the public parking facility. For the secured parking, this will address the current need for additional parking space for personnel as well as patrol cars and equipment. On the public side, provides additional parking spaces for visitors visiting the campus. Not only does this address current needs, but the intent is that this will also accomplish the required number of parking spaces that would be required with the future headquarters expansion. That's within the next 5 years, at least a planned time frame of 5 years. Ancillary improvements on the property include stormwater facilities, site lighting, and then frontage improvements will also be implemented. The police department has around 100 personnel. So this includes employees at the animal control facility as well as community volunteers that come and go and operate from this site. The picture on the screen was taken from the facilities assessment, just depicting the current layout of the current campus. So in the middle of the frame is the secured parking area, and at the bottom of the frame is the public parking area. I will caveat this heavily that this is a conceptual plan. We put this together with the police department mostly to put our conversations on paper and make sure that we had the shapes and critical pieces that we wanted to talk about and get included in a scoping conversation with the engineer. So this will evolve and become much more detailed as we move through the design with the engineer. The city selected HMH Engineering from the city's consultant roster. That's how they were selected. The total cost of this contract for engineering design, and it also includes bidding services, is in the amount of $90,475. Staff is requesting a 10% contingency, so the total request this evening is $99,522. Staff would have the opportunity to negotiate construction support services at a future date, likely post-design bidding with HMH Engineering. This is budgeted and funded through public safety impact fees. So next steps, pending authorization of a contract this evening, move forward with design, bidding, envision that city staff will return with a recommendation, project update, likely late 2025, early 2026 is looking to be the time frame. We are looking to construct this in 2026. So ideally be able to go out to bid spring time frame. With that, I will answer any questions that you may have.
Questions of Andrew?
I move to approve the professional services agreement with HMH for the police department parking lot improvements.
Second. Motion seconds, further discussion.
I just,
Oh, I'm sorry,
like,
Samantha.
we're not gonna be redoing all of this then once we do this expansion, right? Like ripping all this asphalt out and,
That is not the intent.
Okay.
So a portion of the parking lot will be constructed on that vacant parcel to the east. We have not, so to clarify, we have not included an evaluation of the site for future buildings and assessment of where those would go. However, the intent is that the parking lot would take maybe 2/3 and leave a third of the parcel that could be used for future buildings, additional buildings. The headworks, sorry, I'm mixing my projects. Headquarters expansion is actually just to, I can pull this up, would be better. It's the mouse. So with the, when we're talking the headquarters expansion, I believe that this area is the area that's designated for that 2-story expansion directly, as well as the future needs as this, once this gets expanded. This is the area that we would likely see as a future building site or future facilities at the police department.
gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Samantha, I didn't see any
No,
question.
it's okay.
We have motion second, further discussion. I believe, yeah, you moved. Motion second, further discussion? Roll call, please.
Blue,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Stigliter,
Aye.
Motion passes, thank you. Next item up tonight is citizens' issue, and this section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the council on a city-related item that is not on the agenda.
They all left 2 hours ago.
Yeah. Administrative staff reports.
We declined to have any.
Yes.
further reports.
Thank you.
Mayor and council comments, I have none. Council?
Also none.
So none. We do not need an executive session.
We do not.
The next motion is,
Go home. Sure.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.